Supremacy Games. Chapter 1201-1225. Spatial Portals. Chief Drogath was taken back. Yes, with spatial portals connecting us with other tribes, we will be able to get reinforcement almost instantaneously. Felix affirmed, this is the only way to turn things around if Lord Hites went all out on us. Felix knew that as long as Elder Stravi gave them permission, Bodadai could easily open long-lasting spatial portals between the tribes. As a space worm, he could open spatial portals with low energy consumption as long as no one was using them all the time. This would turn the Alliance into a useful force to be utilized by the Mire Marauders. It sounds good and all, but even if we got the permission, have you forgotten that elementals lose most of their strength if they leave their territory? Chief Drogath said. This was a fatal flaw in this plan, since even if the other tribes wanted to help, they wouldn't be able to do much but hold the Mire Marauders down during crucial times due to their weakened state. I know, and I believe I have a solution for it. Felix walked away from Chief Drogath and created a dimensional mirror that was connecting to the northern forest. Are you sure you aren't an elemental in disguise? Chief Drogath commented as he studied the dimensional mirror with a faint look of marvel. Who could blame his reaction? Felix had demonstrated that he could manipulate water, poison, lightning, gemstone, space, and even his size. Felix chuckled at his comment and remained quiet, not wanting to freak him out by mentioning the rest of his arsenal. Be right back, he said as he walked to the northern forest. The moment he stepped his foot there, Chief Clover's face manifested on a trunk of a tree. What brought you back so soon? He asked. Chief, I'm hoping you give me permission to test something with Chief Drogath on your territory. Felix requested. What is it? He asked as he glanced through the dimensional mirror and saw Chief Drogath, standing in front of it with his usual stoic expression. I want to try and see if it is possible for Chief Drogath's territory to expand through the spatial portal without him losing his control or prowess on it. Felix asked with a serious tone. He knew that he was literally asking Chief Cloverus to trust him enough to give up a piece of his territory to another chief, even if it was temporary. It was still a big request. I guess this is related to the war. Chief Cloverus frowned. I really don't want to take part in this. Just as Felix wanted to try and convince him a bit harder, Chief Cloverus sighed, but, since you have been good to us, it won't be right to reject such a request. So, go for it and make it quick. Thank you, Chief. After showing his gratitude, Felix returned to Chief Drogath and told him about everything as he wasn't able to hear them talk through the dimensional mirror. Sound was easily lost in the fabric of space with such lower quality portals. I am more surprised that Cloverus has agreed to your insane plan. Chief Drogath remarked, he must really like you. I hope you like me even more, as if this trial worked, you won't be pleased with what I am planning. Felix thought to himself as he showed a mere smile as a reply. Without further ado, Chief Drogath stretched his hand forward, causing the forest's swamp to begin spilling inside the dimensional mirror and reaching the northern forest. In less than a few seconds, more than a kilometer radius around the dimensional mirror was turned into a similar swamp, causing some trees to blacken and some to have their leaves cut off like the tree was aging rapidly. This was the effect of the poison inside the swamp as it was attacking any foreign object or life form indiscriminately. Chief Cloverus merely knitted his eyebrows in silence at this sight. How do you feel? Felix asked Chief Drogath. Normal. Chief Drogath answered as he controlled the other part of the swamp to his own desire. Normal as in you haven't lost your consciousness prowess? Yes. Chief Drogath nodded. As expected, it worked. Felix's face broke into a wide elated smile at the news, knowing that this test success was enough to change the entire course of the conflict if used right. Felix went back to the northern forest and thanked Chief Cloverus for his trust. Then, he returned and closed the dimensional mirror shut. With it being closed, the connection was cut off to Chief Drogath forcefully, turning the swamp into a normal environment. Then, Chief Cloverus got rid of it and returned that patch of forest to its natural appearance. It's time for the hard part. Just as Felix was about to open his mouth and request permission from Elder Stravi, he got ahead of him with a proposal. 10 food containers on a daily basis for each spatial portal between two tribes. Felix and Chief Drogath were left speechless, not knowing whether to feel shocked at his agreement or his abusive rip-off. Don't even think of haggling with me like that, bastard. Elder Stravi added, you either accept it or forget about it. Supreme El. I agree. You. It's all right. Felix smiled bitterly at Chief Drogath, it's just food, it doesn't matter as much as keeping your tribe safe. Asna and Candace rolled their eyes at his shameless tear-jerking performance, knowing that the bastard could afford hundreds of such transactions with the amount of food he brought with him. Unfortunately for the natives, they had no idea about this, which made Felix's actions touch Chief Drogath deeply. He might not have said anything, but Felix knew that Chief Drogath was accepting him more and more. He, if things went as expected in the war, I will receive the best help in my training. Felix laughed in his mind like a sleazy merchant who just succeeded in swindling his customer. Although this really was downright immoral to be manipulating people's emotions through such fake actions, but Felix was already deep down in his revenge plan to give a sh*t about anyone's emotions. As long as his goals could be achieved, he couldn't care less about the morality of his actions. Elder, I hope our partnership stays between us. Felix requested, fearing that everything would go to sh*t if Elder Stravi Big Mouth exposed them again. Don't worry, my mouth is sealed shut, now, give me my food. Although Felix still didn't trust him completely, he beamed more than 3,000 food containers and said with an unwilling tone, this is payment for a month. This amount was enough to make even Chief Drogath's mouth water a bit. Before he could stare at them for long, the food containers disappeared with Elder Stravi voice. *CK, I could have gotten much more out of him. King Valdher was irritated by the sight as he felt like he was cheated out of his services. Elder Stravi received 3,000 food containers in a mere month for nothing but giving out permission. Meanwhile, he had to act like a damn radio for an entire decade. Alas, whether he was pissed off at the deal or not, it was already too late to change it. For such authoritative elementals, their word meant everything to them as it defined their reputation in the whole galaxy. Now, the only thing left is to convince Chief Drogath and our allies of my plan. Felix thought to himself with a serious look. I really doubt Chief Drogath will accept it. Asna shared. He won't be pleased, but he won't reject it. Felix smirked coldly, I have shown him that I invested too much in this conflict for him to have cold feet. You are really quite evil. Candace licked her lips, I love it when you act like this. Keep it in your pants, woman. Asna gave her a lazy cold look that was enough to wire Candace's brain back to normal. Felix ignored their banter and stared at the far distance in direction of the Scorchlanders' territory. If this strategy worked, I will be training at peace for a very long time for both sand and poison element, but if it failed? I will be forced to either give up on poison manipulation or seek out another tribe. Felix knew that his new reputation after the war would be down to the gutter if he failed with his strategy. This meant, even the other poison tribes on the other continent might not entertain him. The stakes were this serious. Back to the present. King Valdher, please tell the Alliance's chiefs to prepare their armies for the counterattack. Felix requested. Although King Valdher said nothing in response, Felix knew that he had accepted his request begrudgingly. It's finally happening. Chief Drogath commentated as he appeared next to Felix. A look of distress could be seen in his eyes, like he wasn't certain about the future. It will be fine, Chief. Felix comforted him with a serious tone, I will never let anything bad happen to the Meyer Marauders tribe. As Felix expected in the past weeks, Chief Drogath wasn't pleased with his plan, but he still accepted it, understanding that it was their best way to save their tribe. Good luck. Let's go, fatty. Without delay, Alhadi opened a portal and jumped inside of it first. Just as Felix wanted to tag along, Selfa caught his arm and asked with a worried tone, "Are you sure you don't need my help there?" Felix patted her hand to comfort her and replied with a faint smile, "I will be fine. You on the hand need to be careful as they will come at you non-stop. The same applies to you," Felix added as he flicked Olivia's forehead. Then, he entered the portal not waiting for their replies, knowing that time was out of the essence. When Felix opened his eyes on the other side, he found himself above a towering sand dune that was overlooking a magnificent golden desert. It was a never-ending stretch of golden sand and granite outcrops that shimmered in the relentless light. Heat waves swayed above the sand dunes, turning the horizon into a murky illusion. There was a little aroma of dust and burning sagebrush in the heavy, dry air. There was nothing but sand and sky as far as the eye could see, sometimes interrupted by a wind-sculpted tree or clump of cactus. The only sound was the occasional gentle ruffle of sand as a lizard or scorpion scurried across the ground. Otherwise, there was complete quiet. Nonetheless, while being desolate, the desert had a weird, eerie beauty, a sense of enigmatic antiquity that gnawed at the spirit. "Let's go." Felix opened a dimensional mirror that was connected to the Desert Wind clan's front lines and stepped inside. Unlike the Mire Marauders' chaotic front lines, there wasn't an ounce of noise near the territorial line. It was for a good reason. As expected, they went into a completely defensive mode. Felix commentated as he watched the Scorchlanders hiding behind their lava and magma barriers across the territorial line. Meanwhile, the desert tribesmen weren't attacking them as they seemed to be building their numbers near the territorial line. "Isn't that the food merchant? What is he doing here? Wasn't he still in the Mire Marauders tribe? Quickly inform the Lord." Since Felix teleported to such a peaceful battleground, the Scorchlanders easily spotted him. He didn't seem to care about being found out as he merely walked toward a gigantic humanoid man made out of a sandstorm. Although he had no features, he stood tall and straight. This was Chief Xander of the Desert Wind clan and the holder of Felix's fate in terms of mastering his runic sand spells. "It's good to see again, Chief Xander," Felix greeted politely. Felix was already familiar with him as they had met multiple times during the Alliance's meetings in the past weeks. His relationship might not be in a friendly state yet, but it was higher than neutral as Felix made sure to always be in his best image near him. Chief Xander nodded and then asked, "How is the situation in the Mire Marauders?" "Not good, they will be engaged on in less than 2 minutes. Then we have to rush our preparation." "Agreed." Both turned to look at Bodadai with similar stoic expressions, making him flinch. "I will start now." Knowing what they wanted from him, Bodadai swiftly teleported to the eastern side of the territorial line. Then, he opened a towering square-shaped portal after he picked the exact destination in his mind. He repeated the same process across the territorial line, opening a dozen of gigantic spatial portals. "What are those?" Gulp. "Is it me or do they resemble spatial portals?" "They can't be portals, even if the Desert Wind clan's chief gave permission. There is no way Elder Stravi will do the same." "Then, what the hell is going on here?" The Scorchlanders were left utterly baffled and creeped out by the sight of those grey illuminating portals. Every one of them had a very bad feeling about this. Yet, they just couldn't fathom what was going on. Just as the appointed commander was about to contact Lord Hishas about this bizarre development, the words ended up stuck in his throat at one of the most horrific sights he ever witnessed. Rumble! Rumble! The ground shook in front of one of the portals as a heavy flood of crystal pure water rushed in direction of the sea of lava. At first touch, sand turned wet and hardened while the lava sea cooled down and released white fog around the portal, blocking everyone's vision. Whoosh! Whoosh! Before the commander and the Scorchlanders could react, their attention was forcefully changed to another portal. This one was releasing a chilling air carried by a surge of milky white snow and icy fragments. When they landed on the lava sea, the reaction was obviously liquidation followed by fog, causing the area around the portal to be hidden as well. Unfortunately for the Scorchlanders, the party was merely at its first leg as the remaining portals began terraforming the environment around the territorial line too. Some were similar environments and some were different. The only thing that mattered was that the lava sea was getting assaulted by all of those new expanding environments simultaneously. The Scorchlander's commander was too stunned and horrified to bother ordering his armies to defend their territorial line. Too bad for him, this was merely the first part of the invasion. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, when the new environments had established a good area of the surface around the portals, thousands of raging elementals surged from each portal, causing the sight to resemble the Avengers Endgame war scene. There were water-based elementals from the Nola River tribe, earth-based elementals from the Underground Dwellers tribe, snow/ice elementals from the Mortha Peak tribe, plant/wood from the Southern Forest tribe elementals, and more. All of those tribes were bordering the Scorchlanders and in conflict with them, causing them to join Mire Marauders' alliance when proposed. By the time they stopped surging from the portals, the territorial line had become a hot pot of multiple environments that separated themselves with invisible lines. Felix smirked as he watched this once-in-a-lifetime beautiful scene of nature coming together with all of its environments in one area without any conflict. Abruptly, the chiefs of those tribes appeared next to Felix and Chief Xander. Each one took a humanoid form of their element, causing Felix to resemble a video game summoner. "Are we late? I came as fast as I was told. Lord Hishas must have been informed by now, let's begin our assault." When they asked those questions, they had their eyes on Felix like he was their leader. It wasn't far-fetched to call him this since he was the lead strategist of this entire war due to the plan being proposed by him, plus, most of the investment belonged to him. "Attack with everything you got," Felix said with a serious look. "This is now a race to the hearts of both territories. The faster we get closer to Scorchlander's main territory, the more cards we will have for our negotiations." This was Felix's master plan for this conflict. Use most of the power of more than 12 tribes to attack from a single direction while the Scorchlanders were weakened due to their heavy investment in the Mire Marauders. With this unfathomable number of armies attacking from a single direction and combining their forces to accelerate the territorial terraforming, even Lord Hishas would feel the sweat. The initial instance of this chapter being available happened at N0, Vel, B, J, N. Attack. With one unified order, the Alliance's armies charged forward as they used tens of thousands of elemental projectiles at the Scorchlanders' barriers. Boom boom boom. To no one's shock, the lava and magma barriers were no match to this overpowering force as they kept falling apart at a rapid pace. "Retreat! Retreat!" Horrified, the Scorchlanders' commander shouted at his army while flying away, ditching the territorial line without a second glance. If Mire Marauders knew that their armies would get run over by the Scorchlanders' reinforcement, then he was certain that his weakened army was going to be deleted out of existence in less than a minute. There was simply absolutely no way to defend their territorial line. Poosh! Felix watched the chaotic battleground with a faint cold smirk, knowing that Lord Hishas should be observing this development with a livid expression. Felix had hit the nail right on the head. Lord Hishas' face was completely twisted in rage as he watched his people being chased after like they were dogs. Yet, what angered him the most was definitely the sight of his territory getting devoured at a dumbfounding speed. "Let's see how long you will last until you give in to our demands," Felix snickered. "Boredom! Bastards!" Lord Hishas cursed as he slammed the throne's armrest into fragments. His eyes reflected the sight of his tribesmen getting hunted down by a never-ending shower of overwhelming abilities. Elementals were hard to kill all right, but if there was enough power to completely ruin their environment, their consciousness would have nowhere to hide or go. This marked their ending. "How did this even happen right below our noses?" Avroim said with an agitated tone. "There is only one to find out." Lord Hishas glared at the ceiling of his throne chamber and shouted, "King Valdher! Supreme Elder! How can you allow this?" Lord Hishas was certain that one of those two elders had a role in helping the alliance create this ambush. In his eyes, it was simply impossible to conduct this perfectly arranged counterattack without careful planning with all parties involved. The fact that the alliance was able to open multiple portals made him more certain. We can do as we please on our celestial bodies, so, know your place before addressing us. King Valdher answered indifferently, not bothering to explain himself. Fortunately for Lord Hishas, Elder Stravi was more understanding as he shared, they paid for permission to open the portals. I may not prefer interfering in your little conflicts, but if the price is right, nothing will stop me. How much did they pay? Elder Stravi asked with a cold tone. He already knew that Elder Stravi could be hired to do anything as long as the price was right. He just never expected that someone would pay him to open spatial portals in his celestial body. Still, he was lucky that Elder Stravi was respectful enough to merely allow the initial permission. Permission was still needed from the chiefs to allow portals in their territory. If it wasn't for this, Felix would have straightaway opened spatial portals near the Scorchlander's main village and attacked it while most of their armies were out. Since he already got permission from Elder Stravi and Chief Xander, there was no need to include King Valdher. He paid more than enough. Elder Stravi went silent after this answer, making Lord Hishas understand that he wasn't telling him more. What do we do, father? Eavroim asked with a worried look. Even if we withdrew all of our armies, we won't be able to stop them in time. Withdrew our armies? Lord Hishas sneered, why would I do that? Before Eavroim could respond, Lord Hishas sent a collective order to all of his commanders. Go all out. The moment Zytos and the rest of the commanders received this order, they didn't think twice about their father's motive before switching to a wild assault. All of the Alliance's tribes, who sent a majority of their armies through the portals, were exposed to this barbaric assault. When the news reached Felix and the Alliance's chiefs, none of them seemed fazed. He is really too predictable. Felix snickered. Millennias of successful conquests through brute force will make anyone always seek out the brute path. Chief Xander said calmly. Felix and the Alliance's chiefs had predicted that Lord Hishas would most definitely attempt to pressure them by attacking their unprotected tribes. That's why they left enough of their army to hold the tribe's territory by creating a defensive blockade. Because the reinforcement of the Scorchlanders in the Mire Marauders' territory was taken from those armies, the blockade was enough to hold them down for a fairly long time, at least, until they reached their goal from their assault. Though, the same couldn't be applied to Mire Marauders. Boy, Chief Drogath has sent you a message. It says, it's getting harder and harder to hold them. King Valdher disclosed telepathically. Felix thanked him for his work and spoke with the Alliance's chiefs. I am going back to the Mire Marauders tribe to help with the defense. Be careful. Good luck. Don't sacrifice yourself. If Mire Marauders tribe was lost, it can always be revived in the future. The debut release of this chapter happened at N0V3L_B1N. The Alliance's chiefs advised Felix with good intentions as they already started to consider him a vital member of their war. Don't worry. Felix nodded in appreciation and teleported tens of kilometers above the battlefield, giving him a perfect view of the ongoing slaughter. Chief Drogath wasn't exaggerating one bit. Felix frowned at the sight of the territorial line already being pushed back more than 10 kilometers. This occurred while the lava sea was moving at a slow pace. Felix could see that the Mire Marauders were doing their absolute best to defend it and slow down the conquest, but to no avail. Even Olivia and Selphie were dancing on the battlefield and using their unique spells to halt the advancement. While Olivia's help was mostly non-effective due to her element being hard countered by the magma, Selphie was really giving the Scorchlanders hell with her combination of spells. Still, her area of influence didn't surpass a mere couple of kilometers due to her energy tank being quite limited. In addition, her time spells consumed a significant amount of energy for each spell. In fact, even Felix's current teleportation spell had left him close to exhaustion due to the distance traveled being way too long. The only difference between him and Selphie was that he had a SNA capable of purifying spatial elemental stones, allowing him to rejuvenate it at a rapid pace. Are you going to use that tactic? Asna inquired after noticing Felix beaming drone-like silver devices into the clouds. It's the only one that will allow me to slow down the conquest's speed drastically or even halt it completely if I am lucky. Felix nodded while flying through the clouds above the battlefield. He wasn't having difficulty with flight as he was using newly mastered lesser spell called spatial levitation. It enabled Felix to make himself or objects levitate freely. Obviously, it used spatial energy as fuel. After spending more than 5 minutes placing those devices, Felix stopped in the middle of the sky above the battleground. Then, he requested from Queen AI an offline version, activate the rainstorm devices. Understood. Since those devices were connected to Felix's AP bracelet, Queen AI could activate them from a distance by using similar technology to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Not being connected to the UVR only meant that Felix was unable to access the network, database, and Queen AI in general. It didn't mean that he couldn't use her as an AI for his bracelet. It's happening! Candace uttered with an excited tone as she saw the already gloomy sky turning much darker and thicker. Then, droplets began to fall into the battlefield. However, because of the explosions and insane heat in the atmosphere, those droplets were turned into mist before touching the ground. They merged with already created fog from the evaporation reaction, causing both armies to not pay attention to them. It's time. Felix folded his legs into a meditation position and sat at the very top of the rainstorm clouds, making him in direct contact with the glorious sun. Felix ignored this magnificent view and increased his size until he was at least 10 kilometers tall. Then, he closed his eyes and folded his hands together. With his nude chiseled chest, and giant colorful gemstones illuminated brilliantly due to the sun rays, Felix appeared like a Buddhist statue to be worshipped for generations. King Valdher, please tell Chief Drogath to retreat his army from the battlefield. Felix opened his eyes and stated with a soothing tone, it's about to get rainy. Kid, you really a devil incarnation, aren't you? King Valdher laughed as he already knew what Felix planned on doing. I am just doing my job. Felix replied calmly as he released a flood of green water from his pores and controlled it to spread throughout the thick clouds above the battlefield. Even though the battlefield stretched for thousands of kilometers, with Felix's water external manipulation, he found absolutely no issue with making his soul-burning water reach every single corner. If seen from above, one would be mesmerized by the sight of rain clouds seemingly having green water veins coursing through them. When Felix finished his preparation, the Meyer Marauders' armies gave up on their territorial line and retreated away from the battleground. Neither Zytos nor his army was weirded out about this sight as they anticipated them to retreat sooner or later. Chi chi chi. Meanwhile, the soft rain had finally turned into a heavy downpour. This made the rain merge with the soul-burning water of Felix in the clouds and carry it down its journey as green droplets. One soul-burning droplet was nothing, but what about billions or even billions of never-ending droplets? What the hell? It burns. Why is it raining? And why the f***ck is the rain hurting my soul? The Sorchlander's mindless aggression was forcefully halted after each one of them ended up getting showered by a soul-burning rain. Because of the heavy downpour, even the insane heat couldn't turn the droplets into a fog before touching the Scorchlanders. To make matters worse, even when the rain turned into fog, it was green as well and kept burning their souls each second. This is my territory now, Felix stated with a flat tone as he watched the Scorchlanders' armies get thrown into utter mayhem. It's happening again. Zytos murmured with a traumatic look at the sight of his armies using whatever means possible to protect themselves from the rain and the fog. Some covered themselves inside barriers of magma and some buried themselves underneath the lava sea. Whatever method was used, no one bothered to push the territorial line anymore when their souls were getting tormented. Meanwhile, the Meyer Marauders didn't know whether to feel relieved or shocked after figuring out that this was Felix's doing. In fact, even Selphie and Olivia were left with mouth agape in disbelief at this sight was simply on the level of a god instead of a mortal. Is this how much he improved in the cold lone island? Selfie and Olivia were left feeling a deep level of despair at Felix's insane advancement. Each time they thought that they were getting closer to Felix, he pull off something like this and wake them up from their fantasy. This F***ing brat is really getting on my nerves. Meanwhile, Lord Hishas had the opposite reaction to this new development. His intense fury could be felt even when lava and magma were everywhere. Who could blame him? He was placing high hopes on capturing the Mire Marauders to use it as a bargaining chip against the alliance. He might be wild in his decisions, but it didn't mean that he was stupid. He knew that Felix's goals lay in the Mire Marauders' tribe survival. As the figurehead of this alliance, he had a big say on the matter of whether to save the Mire Marauders or give up on them. Now even this card was about to get forcefully taken away from him. Lord Hishas wasn't having it. Zytos. Order those F***ers to stop hiding on individual barriers and work together to create a giant shield as high as possible to protect the entire army. If it was up to him, Lord Hishas would have created the shield on his own. Unfortunately, there was one universal rule in the entire galaxy about elemental conflicts that couldn't be overridden by anyone. Elementals could only fight other elementals on the same level of hierarchy as them due to the unbridgeable consciousness prowess difference. This was a rule invoked by four Mother Siamese personally and upheld by every elemental for the sake of their protection. Obviously, there were exceptions to this rule since punishments had to be given out to those deserving of them. In this case, Lord Hishas had no right to exert his powers on the Mire Marauders' elementals when he was the one invading them. This meant if he wanted to join the conflict, he could only fight Chief Drogath, Chief Xander, and the rest of the Alliance's chiefs. Unfortunately, when the chiefs fight each other, it always resulted in the mass destruction of the environment due to their insane strength. This infringed on the only rule Elder Stravi had in his world, which meant unless Lord Hishas wanted to summon his wrath on him, he better continue leading his people passively. Rumble rumble. Zytos made sure to use his father's name to install fear into the hearts of his people when he gave them the order. This made the Scorchlanders fight through their cowardness and fear of the rain and build one unified humongous shield that resembled a ceiling made out of hardened magma. Naturally, it was supported by countless pillars throughout the battlefield. With the massive numbers of the Scorchlanders, it took them merely a couple of minutes to get the job down. Oh no! This is bad! They countered it. When the Mire Marauders saw the rain turn into the fog above the ceiling and remain separated from the battlefield, they couldn't help but feel dread creeping up on them again. Haha! Good job everyone! Zistos praised while laughing in elation at their father's tactic working perfectly against the rain. The Scorchlanders also cheered in excitement as they watched what remained of the fog disappearing from their territory. As long as the Scorchlanders protect their shield, they can continue moving forward. Olivia exclaimed with a worried tone. This was exactly what happened as Zytos assigned a portion of his army to be responsible for protecting the shield and also extending it into unprotected areas. Because of this, their conquest speed was going to take quite a big hit, which could be considered a small victory for Felix and the Mire Marauders. If it was someone else, he would be satisfied with this ending and wish for the best, but not Felix. Nice try, but it's not enough. Felix uttered with a flat tone as he stared at the magma ceiling that was blocking his vision completely. Oh ho ho, you have more? King Valdher asked with an intrigued tone as his face manifested in the clouds near Felix. You will see. Felix replied while pausing the overflow of the green water from his pores. This caused the next waves of rain to return to normal. Since the rain was falling also in the Mire Marauders' territory, the Scorchlanders were surprised when they saw it. Haha! He must have given up. Phew, thank goodness. Don't grow complacent. It might be bait to give up on our shield. Zytos warned everyone, not daring to let down his guard ever again against Felix. The initial posting of this chapter occurred via N0v3L.B11N. He was smart to think like this. Unfortunately for him, it didn't really matter that much. Rumble rumble. Without any warning, the battleground's noise was deafened by one of the loudest natural noises in the entire universe. thunderclaps. The Scorchlanders lifted their heads with various looks of confusion, shock, and a hint of dread. The clouds are flashing green. When their eyes landed on the distant thunderclouds outside of their shield's range, that hint of dread was turned into full-blown bone-chilling fear. Please don't tell me it's what I am thinking of, please. Rumble. Boredom. Boredom. Before they could even resort to prayers and wishful beggings, the brilliant thunderclouds began raining down with thousands of thick green lightning bolts across the entire battleground. To the absolute shock and fear of the Mire Marauders and the Scorchlanders, the lightning bolts were insanely powerful, as each strike that landed on the magma ceiling ended up creating a massive hole. When there were thousands of lightning bolts striking each second randomly, it was to no one's surprise that the magma ceiling was getting absolutely battered. Thud thud. Thud. Giant fragments kept falling into the lava sea, pillars cracked apart after they lost their balance, and the Scorchlanders were turned into a shambled army yet again. To make matters worse, with the shield's hastened destruction, the lightning bolts began targeting the Scorchlanders. Unlike the soft rain and fog, the lightning bolts carried one of the most potent soul-burning effects in all of Felix's elements due to their destructiveness. This resulted in multiple Scorchlanders literally getting one shot by a lightning bolt, falling into the lava sea with no intentions of ever getting back. Selphie, Olivia, Chief Drogath, King Valdher, Lord Hishas, and Zytos were left staring with stunned and aghast expressions at the Scorchlanders' massive army getting absolutely demolished by one person. One human. One outsider. One mortal. It was an uncanny sight that no one anticipated ever occurring in the history of the elemental galaxy. While the entire battleground had been turned upside down, the main culprit could be seen still sitting in the same position and with the same size. SZZLZLZLZLZLZLZ. The only difference was that his entire nude body was covered from bottom to top with brilliant electrical green discharges, causing his long hair to be forcefully unbraided and stand upright akin to spikes. Felix opened his eyes slowly, showing nothing but illuminating electricity coursing on his pupils, and then glanced below him at the dying Scorchlanders. "You should have stayed with the rain," he uttered indifferently as lightning escaped from his mouth with each word released. "Now, he looks more like me," Thor stated with a cocky smirk and a hidden proud look. "Tisk, show off." Hormungandr clicked his tongue in irritation at the sight of Thor's cocky smirk. While he was immensely pleased with Felix's utilization of lightning, he still felt a bit vexed that his element was being shunned to the side. But, he knew that Felix wasn't really playing favoritism, as poison element was not the best option in this situation. After all, poison was originally in a mist form, which made it get countered heavily by the intense heat of the battlefield. Additionally, poison's main source of power came from the inducement effects, which were useless against elementals in general. After all, how could you poison nature itself? Even if he used a potent brittle inducement to damage the hardened bodies of Scorchlanders, they would still turn into lava and void his attempts. As for the deconstruction sacred attributes or other attributes, why use them when a soul-burning attribute was literally the best counter to elementals? This left only lightning as the best option, even though Felix had absolutely no control over such a massive thunderstorm. Rumble rumble. The only thing he could do was keep fueling it and watch it attack anything in sight. "Father, we have to do something. Our army isn't going to last like this," Eavroim said with a distressed tone. "Bunch of good-for-nothings." Lord Hishas cursed coldly as he stood up from his throne, causing the entire throne chamber to shake at his awake. "Father, don't tell me, you are heading there personally." The initial instance of this chapter being available happened at N0, Vel, B, J, N. Eavroim was left shocked by her conclusion, as she knew that if her father dared to join the conflict personally, he would be breaking laws set by Formother Siasim herself. "I have no intentions of touching the Mire Marauders or helping my people." I am just heading out to get rid of an outsider vermin who keeps butting in my business. Lord Hishas sneered as he looked at the ceiling. I believe I am within my own rights to do that. Thought so. Elder Stravi and King Valdher neither confirmed nor denied his statement, which made Lord Hishas snort out loud. He already knew that those two had absolutely no authority to keep his hands away from Felix when he was literally at war with him. Because of Felix's foreigner status, he obviously didn't fall under the same sets of laws as elementals, which meant that Lord Hishas was free to do as he pleased with him. Ka thump! Ka thump! With a wave of a hand, the throne chamber started shaking wildly like an earthquake had come for a visit. The tremor's source was the humongous towering black volcano as the throne chamber was built right at the bottom of its mouth. PSSSHS PSHSHS. Bubbling red lava began bursting from the bottom, filling up the entire throne chamber and covering Lord Hishas and Eavroim. Handle matters here when I am away. Before Eavroim could reply, she found herself thrown out of the volcano and forced to turn into a lava eagle to stay in the air. Boom! With a sudden thunderous explosion, the biggest volcano in this world finally erupted, launching an unfathomable amount of lava and magma into the air. However, nothing fell down at the empty Scorchlander's village. He is really royally pissed. Iverwa muttered with a stunned expression at the sight of the magma, lava, and gas being turned into a singular flaming meteor that was flying into the atmosphere. Obviously, its direction was the battleground. Meanwhile, Felix and everyone around the battleground were left baffled after hearing a sudden explosion and being hit by a weakened shockwave. What's this? Felix frowned, knowing that such shockwaves could only be produced by explosions on a nuclear level. It has to be a volcano eruption. Asna guessed after eliminating the usual suspects due to them not existing in this world. If you are right, it means he is finally coming. Felix took a deep breath to calm his arising agitation at the notion of being hunted down by Lord Hishas. Even the bravest would feel nervous if they were told that a being on a primogenitor's level was after them. You can still retreat to Meyer Marauder's territory. Asna said, no one will judge you. No, I will judge myself for being a coward. Felix hardened his expression. Felix knew that if he fought against Lord Hishas in his environment, he had zero chance of winning. However, right now he was tens of kilometers above the surface. The sky was part of the atmosphere, which meant part of Elder Stravi's main consciousness. That's why Felix wasn't too afraid about being above Scorchlander's territory, as he knew that Lord Hishas wouldn't be as deadly. I have already got rid of him using his consciousness prowess on me. So, there won't be another chance of experiencing Lord Hishas' strength even if he was massively weak. Before Felix could finish speaking, his instincts alarmed him of an immense incoming danger from the back. When he turned around, Felix felt chills coursing down his spine at the sight of a billion-ton raging meteor, falling straight into his location. This was happening while he was already above the highest point of the clouds. He really brought with him his environment. Thor stated speechlessly. This changed everything in everyone's eyes, as they knew that Lord Hishas would have more natural resources to use in addition to the elemental abilities he could create. If I can't even be courageous to fight here, I have no right to exert my revenge. Still, Felix merely toughened his expression and extended his finger into clouds, absorbing every single electrical discharge into his finger. Since the thunderstorm spanned thousands of kilometers, Felix's finger kept turning brighter and brighter until it was nearly impossible to look at it without getting blinded. Rumble rumble. Naturally, this reduced the number of lightning bolts until there were barely a couple of ones striking here and there. When it was fully pacified, the Scorchlanders lifted their heads and stared at the thunderstorm with looks of confusion and relief. One could only wonder if they would feel relieved to know that the nightmarish thunderstorm was now fully concentrated at the tip of Felix's finger. It was pointed at no one but their lord. With a cold, resolved look, Felix uttered, "Thunder God's decree." Just like the last time Felix used this ability on the bishop at his promotional game, a magnificent thin green beam surged from his finger, casting a blinding flash of light that illuminated even the darkest cloud in the thunderstorm, baffling everyone on the battleground. When the flash of light dimmed down, the laser beam disappeared as well, leaving behind two aftermaths. Felix's extended finger emitting smoke and the blazing meteor exploding into gigantic burning pieces. Before Felix or his tenants could enjoy this beautiful once-in-a-lifetime scenery, the sonic boom of the explosion finally reached Felix and the thundercloud behind him. Whoosh! The shockwave was insanely powerful as it had cleared out a humongous hole in the thunderstorm, causing the sun rays to finally reach the ground and most importantly, allowing both armies to see what was happening. When everyone saw Felix's gigantic body that was covered in electricity and the shattered falling meteor, they were left stupefied and mostly bewildered as hell. It can't be. Impossible. Only Chief Drogath and Zytos had a small inclination on what had occurred, yet, no matter how much they tried, their minds simply refused to accept their conclusion. Was it really this easy? In fact, even Felix was finding this situation a bit difficult to believe even when he was clear about the terrifying power of his ability Thunder God's Decree infused with soul-burning attributes. He almost never used this ability since it required an insane amount of electricity to be viable and it was hard to spend time in the middle of the fight to meet this condition. But in this situation, he had everything prepared for him and Felix merely took the free opportunity to use it. He didn't have a single clue that it was going to be this freaking powerful to the point a billion-ton meteor got blown out. Alas! The fairy tale had to end even if it lasted for a mere second. Rumble rumble! I knew I was asking for too much. Felix narrowed his eyes in complete concentration after spotting the destroyed meteor fragments merging with each in a single point. In a few moments, the process ended and the smoke was pushed away by the breeze, exposing Lord Hesha's demonic body in his glory without a single bump on him. The only difference between this version and the one on the throne was the size, as even with Felix's current towering height, he was still forced to lift his head to match Lord Hesha's dreadful cold eyes. That hurts, you little brat! Lord Hesha's uttered without an ounce of pain in his expression, like his soul didn't just receive one of Felix's most powerful strikes. Well, ****. Felix smiled through his nervousness as he covered his body in a condensed crystallized armor, knowing that this was the moment of truth. The moment when he learns and experiences the true terror of beings at the same level of hierarchy as primogenitors without any safety net. Lord Hesha's extended his molten clawed hand in direction of Felix and said, "It won't be polite not to return the favor." The moment Felix saw Lord Hesha's hand turning brighter and brighter, he immediately manifested 10 thick crystallized adamantine gates in front of him and used his levitation spell on them to keep them hovering in their place. Foolish attempts! Lord Hesha sneered as he fired a dazzling red laser beam from his hand. The laser beam was extremely intense and powerful, making the tenants recognize immediately that it was much stronger than Felix's Thunder God's Decree. How strong exactly? Boom! 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 The crystallized adamantine thick gates ended up getting pierced through one after the other without much resistance, like they were made out of some cheap alloy instead of one of the hardest materials in the universe. ****. Felix's expression couldn't help but turn ugly as was forced to evade the lava laser beam to save his dear life. His most trusted defensive gemstone had failed him at the very start of the fight, making him understand that he was simply way out of his depth. How can he create such an intense beam in mere seconds without preparation while Felix needed an entire thunderstorm? Candace asked with a deep frown as she watched Lord Hesha's playing with Felix by using a single laser beam. Primogenitors and elementals at our level are able to condense, absorb, process, and refine anything related to their element at a godly speed due to the massive time we spent on doing them. Hormungandranslred. In other words, Lord Hesha's could manifest multiple intense lava red beams as he pleased at ground-breaking speed while Felix needed to struggle to create just one. In this department, there was simply no way Felix could catch up to Lord Hesha's or the primogenitors without spending a lot of time. I guess you are too fast to get hit by one. How about 10? Lord Hishas smiled coldly as he started launching 10 lava laser beams from his fingers akin to a machine gun. Boredom! 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 This added intense pressure on Felix's ability to defend himself as he kept using crystallized gemstone barriers, shields, walls, and whatever means possible to avoid getting hit. As for focusing completely on dodging, Felix was fast all right, but those intense lava laser beams were even faster since they were instantaneous beams. Haha! He *CKED up big time. He actually made our Lord make a personal move on him. He should feel honored. Kill him! Kill him! Kill the bastard! Meanwhile, the Scorchlanders grabbed popcorn and watched this ongoing one-sided showdown, cheering for their lord to slay Felix to vent their aggregation from being bullied by him before. In the opposite direction, Meyer Marauders, Olivia, and Selpha had various negative emotions written on their faces. Please help him! Olivia begged Chief Drogath, knowing that he was the only one capable of standing before Lord Hishas. As for her, as much as she wanted to offer her assistance, she knew that she would be merely a hindrance to Felix and might even cause him to get killed off faster. My apologies, little one. Chief Drogath sighed, my hands are tied on the matter. If I dared to fight off Lord Hishas in the sky, he will definitely overpower me and might even destroy my consciousness. If that happens, everyone in my territory will drop dead. I can't do that to my people. You. As much as his explanation was reasonable, Olivia still refused to accept it since she believed that Felix was in this mess because he wanted to help them. In reality, Chief Drogath really didn't owe Felix anything yet since he was the one who was desperate to join the conflict to fulfill his goals. So, why would Chief Drogath risk the death of his people for the sake of saving him when he hired Felix to help them survive? It was like hiring a bodyguard for your protection, but you're expected to sacrifice yourself for the bodyguard's safety. The first reveal of this chapter happened through N/Vel B J N. Plus, I believe that your friend is engaging with Lord Hishas willingly. Chief Drogath frowned. He had many chances to use teleportation and return to my territory and avoid the fight completely. Hey! This left both Selphie and Olivia stunned as when they thought about it, they realized that he was right. Why? Selphie murmured as she eyed Felix, who was still doing everything in his power to not get hit by the beams. Unlike Olivia, she really considered flying over there to help Felix, but after realizing that he was doing it voluntarily, she understood that Felix wouldn't want her up there. SHT, he isn't taking this seriously at all and I am still getting F'd up. Felix cursed while thinking of new plans to solve his current predicament without resorting to escaping from the fight. Thunder God's decree failed to harm him even when it was powered up with a soul-burning attribute. This means most of my elemental attacks are pretty useless against him. This leaves me with only spatial spells. The cogs in Felix's brain worked at their fastest speed to come up with a legit strategy as he knew that Lord Hishas was bound to get bored of toying with him. When that happened, he would go all out and that would be the end of the fight with either Felix *ing off or dying. But I can't cast spatial spells under this intense pressure. Against strong opponents, spellcasters always start with spells running in the background to protect them as well as their runic hexes. This would allow them to go all out in their assault, making sure that their entire focus would be on just spell casting. But in this case, Felix was literally against a deity with a reaction speed of 0.001 seconds or even lower, meaning that he would be always faster than Felix's spell casting. The only reason Felix managed to hit him before with Thunder God's decree was because of its uncanny speed. Losing focus against me, you are a bold one. Abruptly, Lord Hishas snapped his finger, causing the laser beams that were dodged by Felix to defy gravity and reverse their pathing, attacking him where he least expected it. Teleportation. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix cast his most reliable evasive spell in his kit, allowing him to disappear from his location, successfully dodging the laser beams by a hair strand. Such a rookie mistake. Lord Hishas sneered as he locked his eyes on the exact position where Felix's body was going to appear from teleportation. He did so through his insane sensitivity to space, as the teleportation spell destabilizes space when used in both locations. Lord Hishas didn't waste this free opportunity as he shot another laser beam at Felix's location while his body was still getting constructed. Boredom. While this entire scenario seemed in slow motion to Lord Hishas, in the eyes of the bystanders, the only thing they managed to capture was Felix's disappearance in a sudden explosion, followed by a rain of blood and 2 ripped-off bloody limbs, falling from the sky. Olivia and Selph's eyes widened to the limit in shock and horror as they kept staring at the falling gigantic limbs and the blood cloud, feeling like their hearts had just dropped to the bottom of their stomach. Felix! No matter how loud they shouted his name, it didn't change the fact that Felix was injured heavily. You managed to change your position at the last moment, not bad. Lord Hishas praised as he eyed Felix through the disappearing blood cloud. Cough. Cough. Felix didn't even hear his compliment as he kept coughing a great amount of blood with a pained expression. His condition wasn't to be envied as he had lost his left leg and arm, plus a sizable portion of his left torso, exposing his mushed-up interior. Fortunately, his fire immunity saved him from getting burnt to a crisp, which was the biggest source of damage to the laser beam. Felix, I think it's time to leave. Asna said with a worried tone as she didn't expect the fight to be this one-sided. Not yet, cough. Felix toughened through the pain and used his new healing ability Water Touch plus Poison Recovery to boost his insane rejuvenation. With the addition of healing sacred attribute to both abilities, Felix's wounds were getting healed at a freakish speed that took even Lord Hishas by surprise. How fast? Well, Felix's body returned to its peak form in less than a second under the dumbfounded eyes of the Scorchlanders, halting their celebration before it could even take off. I have to give it to you. You're an interesting creature for sure. But, it's time to end things. Lord Hishas narrowed his eyes coldly and uttered, "Wind coffin." Whoosh! 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 Abruptly, Felix was assaulted with intense powerful wind gales from all directions, causing his body to get affixed in a single place. This could be considered as an upgraded version of what Felix experienced against Eldred as he realized that it was just impossible to move a finger. In fact, even breathing became difficult as his lungs were being pressed to their limit. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Felix got agitated as he kept thinking of ways to free himself without repercussions, but, he realized that there was none. The primary upload of this chapter happened on N0V3L/B1N. If he used teleportation or spatial displacement, he would be setting himself up for failure as Lord Hishas would always act one step faster than him. The only way to avoid this was by having quicker reflexes or thinking reaction than him. Increasing his body mass to escape the wind pressure would make it impossible to evade the laser beams. As for decreasing it, well, nothing much would change. Even his crystallized shields or barriers would fail to protect him like before, especially when he had less time to make them. Is this it? Is this my current strength compared to such figures? Felix would be lying if he said that he wasn't absolutely devastated by the fight's development as he didn't expect to get bested in all departments. This happened while Lord Hishas wasn't even using his consciousness prowess or taking this fight seriously. I just can't accept this ending. Felix's expression turned from frustration to absolute anger as he could see his confidence crumbling before his own eyes. The confidence that he needed to fight off the Darkin faction. The confidence that he worked his ass off to cultivate and keep him always motivated and certain that there would be a day when he reached the same level as primogenitors. Felix knew that if he lost just a bit of his confidence, he could forget about avenging his family, friends, and race. Felix might seem normal on the outside, but only he and the tenants knew that the guilt of killing off his family was still eating him alive on daily basis, making him even have nightmares during his sleep. Yet, he was able to keep his cool at all times simply because he knew that he still had work to be done, but now? His future really looked too bleak and Felix knew that if he retreated like this, he was done for. Uncaring about Felix's rapid thought process, Lord Hishas launched a laser beam at him and waited to see if he was going to use teleportation near him or not. Even though he knew that it was coming, he couldn't do much about it since the runic hex could be controlled to appear in any location as long it was above or below Felix, making it possible to be activated without interruption. The only runic hexes that Lord Hishas could interrupt were the ones cast near him, which was the reason Felix knew relying on spatial spells wasn't going to work. The moment Lord Hishas sensed a disturbance in space in Felix's location, his first instinct was to look around him in case Felix was foolish enough to repeat the same mistake. Hey! However, before he could do this, he was startled by the sight of his laser beam going through Felix like he was a ghost. Is that spatial imprisonment? Lord Hishas recognized what Felix used immediately, which truly threw him off. Who could blame him? Not even Felix's tenants thought of him being crazy enough to the point he would use spatial imprisonment on himself just to stay in the fight. It was a known fact that spatial imprisonment captured the target inside a different temporary dimension. Felix was inspired by this idea at the last moment by the wind coffin ability as it made him realize that he could still avoid the attack without needing to move. Was it an unorthodox crazy move? Yes. Did it work? Absolutely. Why are you still trying so hard? Lord Hishas asked with a weird look, you should know by now that you aren't going to win this. Felix ignored his question and used the chance to teleport right behind Lord Hishas while still imprisoned in a different dimension. Without an ounce of hesitation, Felix released a long dreadful spatial blade at Lord Hishas, causing his torso to get sliced up akin to butter. I did it, I hit him. Felix uttered with a look of exhilaration and disbelief as he watched Lord Hishas' torso fall into two directions. He bet everything on this attack as it was the last thing in his pocket, knowing that spatial imprisonment allowed him to cast only spatial spells. Felix wasn't delusional to trust that his attack was going to hit since spatial blades were slow and left spatial destruction at their awake, making them noticeable even by normal fighters. So, his Hail Mary had less than 0.000001% of it working. As expected, your motive is really to just hit me. Alas, his happiness was short-lived as Lord Hishas' body got reformed back to shape after ditching the magma body parts sliced by the spatial blade. He allowed himself to get hit. Felix's heart dropped to his stomach as his confidence was finally cracked. Even he couldn't help but feel a sense of despair as from the start to the end of the fight, nothing was in his control, something that he had almost never experienced before in his life. His wits, schemes, and unique ideas that always got him out of trouble were completely useless against such raw overwhelming strength. This was enough to shatter anyone's confidence. Felix, please leave already. Asna begged him. This fight proved nothing but you are still not ready to fight those bastards, you can always get ready with time. Don't worry, I am leaving. Felix smiled bitterly as he planned on teleporting back to the Mire Marauders, finally having enough of this fight. He might have planned at the start to defeat Lord Hishas, but it turned into just hitting him. Now that he realized that even that was out of the question, what's the point of trying anymore? Unfortunately for Felix, he played too much with his fate and it was time to pay the price. You think it's easy to leave after getting this close to me? Lord Hishas uttered with a diabolical smile as he suddenly released his consciousness prowess to the limit. It was a thick red aura that was visible to even the bystanders at the surface. Before Felix could react, the aura surrounded his imprisoned body and expanded to many kilometers until even the Sorchlanders and Mire Marauders felt an intense pressure pressing on their skin. As for Felix, no matter how hard he tried to use his teleportation spell, it kept getting interrupted due to the spiritual pressure aura. Felix stopped his useless attempts and took a deep breath to calm his rising agitation, knowing that it wasn't the time to lose his cool. You are really going to break your word? He said as he looked directly into Lord Hishas' eyes. Break my word on you? Tisk, you aren't worthy. Lord Hishas sneered, I am merely exerting my consciousness prowess in Elder Stravi territory. Because Felix was currently in a different dimension, This deadly spiritual pressure was useless against him, but at the same time, it made it impossible for any spatial spell to manifest in the original dimension. In a sense, Lord Hishas really wasn't using it on him, which meant he did not break his word, and it was Felix's fault for taking such a stupid risk to use spatial imprisonment on himself. So, now what, are you going to wait for me until I exhaust my spatial energy? Yes. Lord Hishas smiled, then, you will be mine. Felix knew that if his spatial energy got exhausted, he would have no way of escaping Lord Hishas even if he retracted his consciousness prowess. What have I done? A mistake to be learned from. Lady Sphinx answered calmly as she closed her book and placed it gently on the table next to her. Before the tenants or Felix could react to her statement, they were left stunned by the sight of her appearing suddenly right next to Felix in the real world. Thank you, Lord Stravi. She nodded her head politely at the sky and turned to look at Lord Hishas, whose expression changed a little for the worst at her sudden appearance. Sir Hishas, please return to your village while I am still asking nicely. Lady Sphinx requested with a soothing tone while still exerting her schooler demeanor like she came here while she was in the middle of an experiment. With the size difference between her and Lord Hishas, anyone would find it hard to take her words seriously, but not Lord Hishas. Still, he wasn't easily scared as he narrowed his eyes deeply at Lady Sphinx and asked, "What if I refuse?" "I was hoping you wouldn't say that." Lady Sphinx sighed, a disappointed mother at her child's answer. "I am not scared of you." Lord Hishas said coldly, "This is my world and you came here with a mere copy, so, I will be polite enough to give you a chance to leave." "You're right, I did come here as a clone," Lady Sphinx said calmly as she pointed her slender golden finger, "but, it's enough to handle the likes of you. Most of you haven't seen Lady Sphinx fighting before, right?" Thor inquired as he looked at the tenants. Besides Hormungandr, everyone nodded their heads. "You're in for a treat then." Thor smirked as he watched Lady Sphinx's nail break into a small golden needle. "Felix, you think that you don't have what it takes to deal with beings at primogenitor's level? You are wrong, you already have the tools, you just can't use them to their maximum potential. Let me show you a small taste of what my ultimate ability is capable of offensively." Before Felix could react to her speech, Lady Sphinx flicked the small golden needle casually in direction of Lord Hishas' massive burning body. The difference in size made her attack seem like an absolute joke, as Lord Hishas wasn't even able to see or sense the needle's location. Because of its non-threatening size, his instincts simply ignored it, making him unable to know whether he was hit by it or not. Lord Hishas frowned as he tried his absolute best to sense the needle, but to no avail. When he didn't find it, he was certain that it was burnt off with his intense body heat. Alas! The golden needle still existed, but he would never be able to find it regardless of how much effort he put into it. That's because it had been reduced in size to the point it had reached a cellular level. Quantum vision. Felix murmured with a dazed expression while staring at Lady Sphinx's unique eyes as she had a gleaming red triangle inside her golden triangle pupil. This was the activation mark of the second level of truth vision, quantum vision. A level that Felix was too familiar with due to his utilization of it in his potion making and general zooming for better sight. Yet, right before his own eyes, Lady Sphinx was using this vision in an offensive manner. "I have no idea what was that joke of an attack, but my patience has run out for you," Lord Hishas uttered as he created hundreds of condensed lava spheres around him, making Felix realize that he planned on bombing the entire area. He had to get serious against Lady Sphinx. "I offer my sincere apology for this," Lord Hishas said with an indifferent tone as he prepared to launch the lava spheres. Instead of being phased, Lady Sphinx merely closed her eyes and uttered with a static tone, "I am sorry for this too." The instant the last word left her mouth, Lord Hishas' eyes widened to the limit in shock after realizing that he was losing his senses on his body at a ground-breaking speed. Meanwhile, Felix and the tenants were presented with a different stupefying sight, making them unable to take their stunned eyes off Lord Hishas. No one could blame them for such a reaction, as Lord Hish's humongous body was being turned into a golden sand needle from bottom to top. "What have you done to me?" Lord Hisha screamed furiously, masking the absolute horror he was feeling inside. He had lived for a very, very long time and had seen and experienced many unconventional things, but this took things into a whole different realm of unnaturalness. How? What kind of sorcery is this? Even King Valdhar and Supreme Stravi were left startled by the image of their close companion having his body literally morphed into a golden sand needle against his will. What truly left them appalled and baffled was the fact that Lord Hisha's body was barely emitting any magma or earth elemental particles anymore. Instead, sand particles were absolutely dominating, which was simply an illogical occurrence no matter how much they thought about it. "You should stop resisting, it's futile," Lady Sphinx said indifferently. "Almost your entire cellular structure has been invaded and altered at an atomic level to sand crystals. Your body doesn't belong to you anymore." The moment Lord Hishas heard this, he swiftly broke a piece of magma from his body, placing his consciousness within it to save himself. He didn't know if Lady Sphinx was spewing nonsense or truly that's what had happened, but he understood that if he didn't do anything, his consciousness would die with his body. "I already said it's futile." Lady Sphinx shook her head. "It can't be." Lord Hishas was left terrified after seeing even his separated piece of magma turning rapidly into crystallized hardened sand. Knowing that his situation was beyond dire and he might actually get killed off, Lord Hishas used drastic measures to save his consciousness. Whoosh! He manifested a sphere of wind and transferred his consciousness into it before escaping as fast as he could toward his territory. He knew that his consciousness was too vulnerable in this form and he could get killed off easily. Fortunately for him, Lady Sphinx wasn't too interested in slaying him since she would be killing off the entire Scorchlander's population. Even though Lord Hish's death would help Felix a lot, she refused to kill him as she came here for exploration and research, not to slaughter wantonly. Nothing would change that. "You can come out now," Lady Sphinx said to Felix as she reduced the size of the billion-ton golden sand needle to its original size. Then, made it turn back into her fingernail, making it seem like everything that had just occurred was a mere dream. "Master, how?" Felix's uttered as he stared at her fingernail absent-mindedly while his heart was beating out of his chest. "Where are your manners?" Lady Sphinx knitted her eyebrows in displeasure. "I am sorry." Felix broke out of his daze instantly and bowed his head deeply before thanking her for saving his ass. "That's more like it. Now, talk with my other clone." Lady Sphinx smiled and patted him on the head like a loving mother, then, she was teleported to her previous location by Elder Stravi. Before Felix took the conversation to his consciousness space, he teleported to the Mire Marauders' territory, not daring to spend another second in that cursed area. "Felix! Felix!" Olivia and Selpha swiftly appeared next to him with looks of relief. Before Felix could talk to them, Chief Drogath manifested near him and asked with a serious tone, "How is Lord Hish's condition?" "He is fine and returning to his territory." Felix answered. "I see, I am glad that you are safe," Chief Drogath said with a hidden look of disappointment. Felix knew that he was disappointed that his master didn't finish off Lord Hishas when she had the chance. "Chief, I am a bit tired from the fight," Felix informed. "I will be returning to the village to recover. If it gets too tough in the front lines, call me." Without waiting for his reply, Felix took off and was chased after by Selphie and Olivia. Chief Drogath didn't react much to his departure as he knew that the Scorchlander's army was in shambles after they witnessed their god getting turned into a golden needle. It was doubtful that Lord Hishas was going to take his time to pacify them when he had just been humiliated in front of everyone. So, Chief Drogath ordered his army to take advantage of the situation to rebuild their blockade and buy time for the Alliance's army, which was still gaining ground toward the Scorchlander's territory at a rapid pace. Inside a hut in the Mire Marauders' village, Felix could be seen sitting in a mediation position alone. He sent the girls back to the front lines after easing their worries about his health. As for Nimmo, he was nowhere to be seen for the past days, most likely in the Void Realm. Right now, Felix was inside his consciousness space talking with Lady Sphinx about her bizarre ability. Master, how? Just how was that even logically possible? Felix asked with the most attentive expression, resembling a student cramming for his final exams. His reaction was understandable as he had just witnessed Lord Hesha's getting turned into Lady Sphinx's nail. His consciousness might have escaped, but Felix knew that if this ability was used on non-elementals, they would be doomed to die. This is an advanced ability of my creation. Lady Sphinx answered, I call it the Philosopher's Invasion. The Philosopher's Invasion. Asna repeated with an astounded look. You are still referring to it as an advanced ability. Thor smiled wryly, I am telling you, it should be categorized as an ultimate ability. Unlike Felix and the other tenants, Thor and Hormungandr had witnessed the true horror of this ability in the old era when Lady Sphinx first ever used it on Mananangel during a one-for-all fight for an extraordinary treasure. Lady Sphinx might be pacifist, but when it came to getting what she wanted, she would restore to violence just as any other primogenitor if other options didn't work. In that situation, no one wanted to give up on that treasure regardless of her offer, which prompted her to use this ability on Mananangel, turning him into crystallized sand, and killing him in front of the attending primogenitors. Luckily for him, he was using one of his clones, allowing him to be revived, but the treasure went home with Lady Sphinx as other primogenitors didn't dare fight her without understanding what she had just used on him. It's not on the same level as my truth vision, so it's an advanced ability. Lady Sphinx said calmly. This again. Thor didn't know how to feel when Lady Sphinx wasn't interested in fights, yet she was still able to create such powerful battle abilities on a level that surpasses his own. But, he didn't let it get to him as he knew that creating such abilities required having godly intelligence and he wasn't even close to one of the most knowledgeable creatures in the universe. They both might be primogenitors and receive the same gifts, but it didn't mean that they would be the same. Each primogenitor had his own experiences over the billions of years that helped shape him differently than the others. The primary upload of this chapter happened on N0V3L/B1N. As for how it works, Lady Sphinx glanced at Felix and answered casually, it's simple, you just need a transmutation ability to turn a part of your body into sand particles. Create a hard object with them and reduce it in size while utilizing your quantum vision to keep your focus on it when it reached the size of atoms. Just like the dark reaction in a potion concoction, give it as much fuel as possible to increase its quantity and then use them to break down the molecules. This would be enough to erase your target as you are killing him below a cellular level. But if you want to fool around with it, you can leave your own atoms behind to bond up, which would change the entire structure to whatever you desire as long as the base was from your DNA. That's why I used my own fingernail, as I can manipulate them on an atomic level through my quantum vision. Oh, of course, you have to do all of this at a reasonable time, otherwise, you will end up dead before you can do any damage. Simple, simple, she said. Felix uttered with a speechless look that was shared by most of the tenants. Felix planned on asking her before why she hadn't told him about this method of using quantum vision, but after hearing her explanation of the ability, he knew that he was way too far from learning it. The fact that Philosopher's Invasion had transmutation ability as one of the requirements was enough to cool Felix's excitement instantly. That's because he had spent more than 500 years in the cold lone island attempting to master water transmutation, yet he barely mastered turning one arm into water in a reasonable time. It was that difficult. Even if you mastered transmutation, you still need enough mental energy to use quantum vision offensively and also a fast reaction speed to finish the entire attack in less than 0.01 second. Lady Sphinx said calmly, you aren't even close to any of those requirements. But, it doesn't mean that you won't reach them in the future. When you do, I guarantee that you will be able to kill any primogenitor you wanted as long as you catch them off guard with it. That's a massive and somewhat arrogant statement, but not a single one doubted it, as they all had serious expressions. They knew that if this ability was used on them and they had no clue about it, there wasn't really much to be done to defend themselves. After all, even if they were primogenitors, the realm of atoms was uncharted territory for the majority of them. On the other hand, if they knew about it, it would be almost impossible to harm them with it, since they would always be on guard against it. Keep working hard on your potion making, as it is the only thing that can help you improve your experience on an atomic world. Lady Sphinx shared, when I see that you are ready to learn it, I will teach you. I will do my best. Felix nodded with a solemn look. The crack in his confidence was restored at the notion that he was sitting on such an overpowering ability that would allow him to at least end one of the Darkin faction members. Felix planned on doing whatever it took to master it, even if it meant wasting materials to continue practicing his potion making in this world. By the way, have you seen that little brat anywhere? Asna asked with an irritated tone for Nimmo. She usually didn't mind Nimmo disappearing for days, as he always returned without causing trouble. But, his current disappearance was really at the worst timing possible, as he could have saved Felix easily by dragging him into the Void Realm, not needing to make Lady Sphinx come all the way. Who knows? Felix shrugged his shoulder, not too bothered by the situation. He might be raising Nimmo, but it didn't mean that he was planning to use him as a tool for his fights and such. He was giving Nimmo his freedom to do as he pleased if he avoided creating trouble for him. Unbeknownst to them, Nimmo was on his way to cause trouble, just not for him. That *tch. What kind of wicked ability she used on me? Back at the Scorchlander's throne chamber, Lord Hishas had yet to finish venting his burning fury after receiving such a humiliating defeat. The worst part was that he was confident in his strength to deal with Lady Sphinx if it came to a battle of elements, especially when she was a mere clone, meaning that her physical strength was at its weakest point. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via /n/ov/l/b/in. He wasn't being too cocky, as he needed to have what it took to fight with most primogenitors on equal terms, or even defeat them as long as the fight was carried on his territory. This isn't over. That brat is bound to step into my territory sooner or la. Hey! Before Lord Hishas could finish his sentence, the entire environment around him changed into absolute chilling darkness without any warning. It was like the day was turned into night with a finger snap. My body, this is, Void Realm. Lord Hishas remarked in his mind with a hint of fear in his eyes, as he could feel his entire body getting disintegrated each second. His reaction was understandable, as he had been kidnapped to the Void Realm without an ounce of resistance, which would freak out even primogenitors. Suddenly, two bright long crimson eyes opened in front of Lord Hishas, making him get into a guard position immediately. Who are you? Why have you brought me here? Lord Hishas asked telepathically while trying his best to keep his calm. Why ask, when you already know the answer? The entity replied with a diabolical crackle that sent shivers coursing down Lord Hishas' soul. Impossible, you can't be him. Lord Hishas might not have never left the Elementals galaxy, but it didn't mean that he had no idea about most of the high-end classified information about the universe. In fact, he might even know more due to Formother Siasim. Knowing the Void Realm and its master was basic information for elementals at his rank. You're right, I am not him, I am the improved version. The crimson eyes stretched widely into the darkness of the background, seemingly trying to smile, but ending up only creating a nightmarish image in the eyes of Lord Hishas. Lord Hishas trusted his words instantly, as he knew that even Lord Cows wouldn't be able to pull him into the Void Realm in this freaky manner. This was the realm of laws, the realm of gods, and to be specific, the realm of Unigens. Why did you bring me here? I have never wronged you. You attempted to take what belongs to me. The entity spoke with an eerie devilish tone. That's an unforgivable crime punishable by death. Hey! What are you talking about? Lord Hishas couldn't help but scream in fear at his answer after realizing that the void energy around him had gotten 100 times more intense, resulting in his body's disintegration at a much more rapid pace. It was so potent, he couldn't even create more magma to protect him, as the magma particles were getting disintegrated the moment they leave his body. Before he could get too freaked out at the notion of getting killed like this, the void energy potency was reduced back to normal. When he focused on the entity, Lord Hishas was left confused at the sight of one of the eyes turning green in color. "What are you doing? I thought you wanted this." The entity spoke with an irritated tone, not caring that Lord Hishas was hearing him. Hey! Lord Hishas' confusion doubled after hearing a cute angry squealing coming out of the entity. "You don't want him dead to not make trouble for that mortal." The entity seemed like he was gritting his teeth in anger. "What has he done to me?" Shut up! I am the real one. You are just a clinging leech, refusing to leave. Daring to threaten me to take back control. He matters that much to you more than fulfilling your own duties. You really have lost your mind. Fine. Just shut up already. Your squalling is ear-piercing. Lord Hishas merely floated still through the whole conversation with the most baffled expression he could muster. He believed at first that this entity might be the paragon of sins. But now? He really wasn't so sure. "You're in luck, you will live." The entity spoke coldly. "Thank you." Just this news alone was enough to delight Lord Hishas and completely ignore that bizarre conversation. As an elemental on a chief level, he knew that his death was more severe than the rest of the elementals, especially now than ever, since the Alliance's troops were on their way to his territory, which meant if he died, they wouldn't hesitate to split his territory amongst themselves and completely erase any chance of him being revived any time soon. Who knows? King Valdhir might never revive him to avoid having conflicts arising in his body again. So, Lord Hishas really couldn't afford to die. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't in the clear yet, as the entity was too pissed off due to Nemo's interference. "Some of your emotions are too delicious to pass on," the red-eyed entity uttered with an eerie tone as three tongues emerged out of nowhere and started moving creepily toward Lord Hishas. One was red and had the wrath symbol written all over it, while the other was purple and had a pride symbol on its surface. The last one was green and had the greed symbol on it. "Stop! Go away!" Lord Hishas attempted to escape from the tongues, but he realized that his motion was crippled with an invisible aura. He knew immediately that it was the entity's spiritual pressure. Because he was on a different dimension, his consciousness prowess was weakened significantly, making him unable to contest it. So, he resorted to begging even though he had no clue what those tongues were about to do to him. Honestly, if he knew, he would have chosen death. Bon appetit! The red-eyed entity smiled widely as the three tongues penetrated Lord Hishas' body and started devouring those three emotions without him being able to resist them in the slightest. "No! No! Stop! Please! Why are you doing this to me?" The process wasn't painful, but Lord Hishas was screaming at the top of his lung for the entity to forgive him. His reaction was understandable as he was beginning to feel his pride dying off and his constant fury being cooled off, even his greed was being erased. He knew that this was much worse than death, as if he lost those three emotions, he wouldn't be able to get them back ever again even if he died and got revived. They would forever belong to the paragon of sins and he could do nothing about it. No matter how much Lord Hishas pleaded, the red-eyed entity continued devouring those three emotions until they were utterly uprooted from him. The red-eyed entity recalled his tongues and said satisfactorily, "What a delicious meal! You monster!" Lord Hishas cursed with a faint whimper like he wanted to get mad at the red-eyed entity, but he just couldn't muster any rage. "Tell anyone about what happened here and you will see the true monster." The red-eyed entity threatened one last time before returning Lord Hishas to his throne chamber. Is this all I get for helping you? Rushing me to give back control?" The red-eyed entity spoke with an irked tone after hearing Nemo's voice. Fine, I have to digest these three laws anyway." The red-eyed entity crackled, "Kakik, with more laws absorbed, you will continue to lose control over me. So, just enjoy your pet life as much as you can. It won't last forever. Eeeeeeeee. Nemo squeaked angrily at his statement, but the red-eyed entity had already gone into slumber to absorb Lord Hish's three emotions. Nemo transformed his body back into a raccoon, but his usual cute excited eyes seemed to be hiding a deep amount of distress and worry. The primary upload of this chapter happened on N0V3L/B1N. A moment later, Nemo controlled his emotions and blinked instantly next to Felix, scaring him out of his consciousness space. You little troublemaker! Where have you been? Felix smiled lovingly as he rubbed Nemo's belly, causing him to keep squeaking in enjoyment. You are spoiling him too much. He needs discipline. Asna scolded Felix as she was still displeased with Nemo's disappearance in key moments. If only she knew what Nemo had just done for Felix, she wouldn't act like this. Nemo seemed to have absolutely no intentions of telling anyone about the red-eyed entity. Sometime later, Chief Xander contacted Felix to inform him that the Alliance's armies had finally reached the Scorchlanders' territory. Felix reached out to Bodadai to open a portal for him as he didn't know their location to teleport by himself. In a few moments, Felix emerged from the portal and joined the Alliance's chiefs in the sky above the raging multi-elemental armies. How are you doing? Chief Xander asked with good intentions. The Alliance's chiefs were interested in his answer too, as they had been informed about Felix's fight by Chief Drogath. I have recovered just nicely. Felix nodded in appreciation before switching the subject. How is it going here? Why aren't there many Scorchlanders to defend the front lines? We also found it somewhat peculiar as it wasn't like this 10 minutes ago. Chief Xander frowned. I see. Felix rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he watched the Alliance's armies freely pushing the territorial line at a record-breaking speed. He knew that the Scorchlanders weren't going to stop them, but it would be possible to slow them down a bit if they gave it their all. He was weirded out as he had heard that the Scorchlanders attacking the Mire Marauders had also stopped their aggression and were pulling their forces gradually. Did Lord Hishas just give up? It can't be. He should be livid right now and wanting to vent his anger at anything. As much as Felix thought about it, this just didn't make any sense. I guess this should be enough. Felix said, let's reach out to him for the deal. The Alliance's chiefs agreed as they knew that pushing past the Scorchlanders' territory might result in pissing off Lord Hishas even more, causing him to engage in battle with them. A fight of this magnitude? No one was going to survive Lord Stravirath when they ruin the environment. It turned out, they didn't need to contact him as Eavroim had already told him about their arrival. What do we do, father? Eavroim asked with a look of agitation, knowing that things weren't looking so good for them. Go talk to them and agree to their conditions so they will leave us alone. Lord Hishas replied with a lazy expression as he leaned against his throne like he just woke up from a nap. Hey! Eavroim was startled by his order. She knew that her father was going to accept a truce or something like that to avoid escalation, but agreeing to any condition? That's just mad. Father, what happened to you? Eavroim said with a worried tone. Do I look like something is wrong with me? Lord Hishas eyed her lazily and ordered, stop asking too many questions and just do as you were told. Eavroim didn't know what was going on, but she still listened to Lord Hishas's commands as she knew that he hated repeating himself. To avoid awakening his wrath, she went to handle the mission. Unbeknownst to her, Lord Hishas had no more wrath to be awakened, greed to seek out a better deal from the Alliance, or pride to continue this whole conquest plan. With those three emotions stolen away, his ambition was gone as well, leaving him to appear like an empty slouthish husk. On the other side, Eavroim had appeared at the front line while having with her some reinforcement from the village. Where is Lord Hishas? Chief Xander frowned in displeasure. We contacted him personally. Is he thinking this lowly of us to send you? The rest of the Alliance's chiefs shared the same sentiment as him, which made Eavroim feel even more nervous about the situation developing to violence. My father knows that you seek a truce. He sent me here to negotiate the terms. Eavroim swiftly said, please state your terms and I will relay them to him. Who told him that we want a truce? Chief Xander sneered, do you think we will be satisfied with a temporary truce after reaching this far? Ah, what do you? We want peace of mind. Chiefess Nola of the Nola River tribe stated coldly, we aren't going back down unless he gives us his word that he will return our lost territories as well as never attempt to trench on them again. This. Eavroim's expression turned for the worst at their insane conditions. Returning territories to all of the affected tribes here was already a giant request. Yet, they still desire to have a peace treaty for eternity? It wasn't happening and she trusted that her father would know how to pressure them to accept the truce. Unfortunately for Eavroim, the situation didn't develop as she envisioned in her mind as the moment she updated her father. He only said one thing with the same lazy tone, fine, I am also too tired of such rewardless conflicts. Before Eavroim could even try to change her father's mind, he told her to stop contacting him as he would be taking a nap. Father. Eavroim lifted her head to look at the alliance's chiefs with a stunned look, making them curious about Lord Hish's counter-offer to make her act like this. Yet, no matter how much they guessed, they could never reach the real conclusion. He agreed. So, when they heard Eavroim's response, every one of them was left utterly stunned just like her. Is she joking? Even Felix doubted this situation and refused to believe it. He interacted with Lord Hishas a couple of times at best, yet, he was certain that would never be his answer. In fact, he made the proposal with the alliance for the sake of helping them get a good amount of time in the truce during the negotiation. Eavroim, this isn't a joking matter. Chief Xander stared daggers at Eavroim before asking her, is that really what he said? Chiefs. I would never joke about such things. Eavroim was on the verge of sobbing. He really agreed to your proposal and said that he became too tired of such rewardless conflicts. Ask Supreme Elder or King Valdher, they will vouch for me. Before Felix or the chiefs could do this, King Valdher confirmed it with a serious tone, he said it and meant it. With his confirmation, reality finally began to sit in the heart of Felix and the chiefs. This left them dumbfounded as everything had just absolutely derailed from the plan and taken the biggest twist they never dreamed of happening. So, that's it? The conflict that lasted for thousands of years is now over? Are you kidding me? Felix said speechlessly. If this was Felix's reaction, one could only imagine how the alliance chiefs were feeling at the moment. They spent thousands of years defending their territories and doing everything in their power to prolong their inevitable death. Even the truce was meant to buy them a few centuries of peace before returning to the same constant life-or-death conflict. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via /n/ov/l/b/in. Yet now, they hear that Lord Hishas was tired from the conquest and gave his word to stay holed up in his territory. It was just too much for them to swallow at once. Did you do something to him? Or your master? This isn't right. Chief Xander turned to Felix while firing a series of questions. He knew that he was the only variable in this war that could cause such an unnatural drastic change. Unfortunately for him, Felix was really innocent in this matter. I am just as bewildered as you guys. Felix replied, I asked my master and she said that she had nothing to do with this. Although Felix was still the biggest suspect, the alliance's chiefs trusted his words as they knew that if he had done something to cause this, he wouldn't have hidden it. After all, to help the alliance finally get peace from Lord Hishas' conquest was simply a massive matter that would affect the entire continent. No one would be dumb enough to not take this credit and receive favor from all the tribes on the continent. After all, Lord Hishas clearly wasn't planning on stopping his conquest with the alliance as he was going to keep going and potentially conquer the entire continent. You guys are focusing on the wrong thing. Chiefess Nola said with an elated tone, who cares about that bastard's motives? We finally have gotten our peace. This is something to be celebrated and not questioned. She is right. Chief Xander smiled, we can always ask Lord Hishas later on. But for now, this is a moment to be cherished and celebrated. The rest of the alliance chiefs finally loosened up and broke wide smiles as they went forward and relayed the news to their own people. When everyone heard that the conflict was concluded and even their territories would be returned, they honestly had no clue how to react or behave. If the news didn't come personally from their chiefs, they would have disapproved of it instantly. Since we are already gathered here, how about we hold a celebration party? Sounds good. No one disapproved of the idea as everyone's emotions were at their peak and nothing would be better at relieving them than a wild party. Then, I will gladly help you with preparing the feast. Felix smiled. He was also just as happy as them since this situation meant that he could focus completely on training his poison and sand element for the next 1,000 years without worrying about the conflict anymore. In addition, he felt that when the news traveled to the rest of the tribes, his reputation would be affected positively, which would help him secure the Thunder and Gemstone tribes. Please don't, you already offered too much food for the war. Mortha Peak tribe chief said with a tone filled with gratitude. I really don't mind. Felix smiled, plus, it will be just wrong to have a party without food. Ah, you are really just making it harder and harder to pay you back. Chief Xander smiled wryly. I am not doing this for any payment. I am just happy to be accepted amidst your tribes. Felix said with an honest look, making Isna almost vomit her food at his shamelessness. You can consider yourself to be an honorary guest in my tribe. Chiefess Nola offered with a smile, you can get anything you want from my tribe. Likewise. I will be waiting for your arrival in my village. The rest of the alliance's chiefs offered the same benefits without any hidden motive. At this moment, they really were too gratified with Felix's help in their conflict and they would do anything to repay him. This pleased Felix to no end as he knew that some of those chiefs must be sitting on extraordinary treasures like the Eternal Firestone. Those treasures were useless for elementals, but priceless for him, which meant they would definitely hand them over if he ever requested. This is really shaping up 100 times better than I envisioned. Felix grinned widely in his mind, I really need to kiss the forehead of whoever caused Lord Hishas to become like this. Nimmo threw a tantrum in the Void Realm after hearing Felix say this, feeling conflicted about whether to expose everything to get the forehead kiss or not. In the end, Nimmo acted against his desires, fearing that if Felix ever found out about the red-eyed entity, he would get rid of him. One could only wonder if his current two personalities resulted from his fear of separation fighting against his awakening. Whatever it was, Nimmo clearly wasn't on top of this as the red-eyed entity was gaining control slowly by absorbing laws. Nimmo used to grow with void energy, but as the paragon of sins, it was nothing compared to growing with them. This meant that the only way to keep the red-eyed entity at bay was by not absorbing laws, but clearly, this was impossible as Nimmo would never hold back when it came to helping Felix. In other words, it was only a matter of time before the red-eyed entity get awakened for real. Nimmo was still too naive as he thought that he was being slick about what he did and that no one found out about it. Nothing in this world escaped the eyes of Elder Stravi, which meant that he had seen him kidnap Lord Hishas and bring back a broken shell of his former self. The first one he told this to was no one but Lady Sphinx. Taking him to the Void Realm without resistance, it must be Nimmo, but this can't be right. Lady Sphinx murmured as she stood in front of a well-organized potion-making station inside a lab made out of hardened black sand. Elder Stravia's featureless cloudy face was floating next to her with a serious expression. Is this going to be causing me problems? I can't be hosting an unstable Unigen on my body as he can destroy my body in the blink of an eye. Elder Stravi asked with a serious expression while having his face come out of the lab's wall. I don't know, I need more information. Lady Sphinx answered, not giving any false promises. On the one hand, she knew that Nimmo seemed to be normal. But on the other hand, this situation made her realize that Nimmo must have either unlocked more abilities, having his strength get boosted, or his memories, allowing him to finally gain real intelligence. As much as she hated to admit it, she knew that it had to be the latter since Nimmo hadn't shared anything about his new abilities with Felix or them. This had never happened since Felix had told him to share anything that he unlocked after reaching a milestone in his growth. Nimmo was always doing that. Lady Sphinx knew that if Nimmo had awakened his intelligence and locked memories, there should be no way he would be acting like a dumb pet any longer. After all, he was the paragon of sin replacement, and with his memories unlocked that gave him his purpose in life, it also gave him his identity and the ego of having it. As much as Felix showered Nimmo with love, he was still a Unigen with the duty of guarding the laws of sins and void. Lady Sphinx, the only reason I came to you with such information instead of kicking out your party is because of my respect. Elder Stravi said with a stern look, regardless if that Unigen uses his sins laws on any elemental in my body again, I won't be as respectful. I understand. Lady Sphinx nodded in appreciation at him giving them a second chance, knowing that he was taking a massive risk for them. The only way to keep them safe from expulsion was by learning more about Nimmo's situation. Obviously, she had to study him without alerting Nimmo as she still had no idea what she was dealing with. I guess my experiments are done here. Lady Sphinx sighed as she beamed the potion-making tables in her spatial card, planning to return to Felix's side. She always prioritized her experiments, but in this case? She knew that if they got kicked out after Felix finally got the peaceful time to master his manipulations, it would hurt him badly in the long run. She had no plans of allowing this to happen even if she had to work on Nimmo's case by herself. Days went by and then months after the day the conflict had ended, N0v3LB1N was the first platform to present this chapter. As Felix had guessed, his reputation had skyrocketed through the entire continent after the news reached everyone's ears. He was praised and glorified even when he stated that he had nothing to do with Lord Hesha's sudden switch of heart. The elementals didn't care about his response as all of them knew that this result wouldn't have happened without his existence. So, Felix gave up on the matter and just accepted his favorable situation. After the party was concluded, Felix ignored everything and jumped straight into training his poison manipulation. Because of the peace being restored, Chief Drogath had given Felix his full support in whatever he asked from him. As for the girls and Bodadai, they returned to the northern forest to restart their training as well. Meanwhile, Lady Sphinx had returned to Felix's side and tried her best to study Nimmo's condition. When she found nothing peculiar as he still acted like the lovable idiot, she sought help from the primogenitors in private, leaving Isna, Felix, and Candace out of the loop. She knew that it would mess up Felix's focus big time if he was told that Nimmo might have been awakened and he was in uncertain danger. So, unless she was certain about her conclusion, she had no intentions of breaking this situation to them. It's been months and Nimmo hasn't shown any change. Thor questioned, I am starting to wonder if your assessment was faulty. I never said that I was 100% certain. Lady Sphinx answered, the only way to be sure is to catch him slipping. So, how long will you be doing this? Elder Kraken said, the little thing spends most of his time in the Void Realm. It's better for me that he spends more time in the Void Realm as it was the only place where he can feel safe enough to let his true self out. Lady Sphinx said calmly, I have void vision to catch him in the act. That's good and all, but it would have been better if it was useful to put a wisp inside his consciousness space. Hormungandr said. He knew that it was possible to put a wisp inside Nimmo's consciousness space just like the rest of the void creatures inside of it right now, but it wasn't that useful in this situation. It was locked, making it impossible to see through Nimmo's eyes like what they were doing with Felix. All of them understood that it would be impossible to convince Nimmo to unlock it as he wouldn't be intelligent enough to pull it off or able to do so and act dumb about it to keep his facade. It was best to not risk their investigation by alarming Nimmo. We can only keep an eye on him and wait until he exposes himself. Lady Sphinx said, this is the safest choice. No one argued with her as they knew that this was a serious matter that might either affect Felix positively or negatively depending on how it was played out. While they were discussing this, Felix was in his own little world, having an empty free mind to allow his senses to reach much further poison particles. He had just undergone having his poison talent enhanced through absorbing condensed purified poison energy. With Chief Drogath giving it his all, the results were even more extraordinary than the enhancement through Chieftess Moana. Increasing my poison range is important, but upgrading my true poison is a priority. Felix thought to himself as he exited the zone and opened his eyes to the sight of the foggy poisonous green swamp. Felix knew that his poison element had much more to offer as its potential was so high, he could actually kill primogenitors with the right attack. During Thor and Hormongondra's epic death match, Thor was slain after he was hit with an advanced ability called 9 Steps of Damnation. This was one of Hormongondra's strongest offensive abilities as it was an incredibly complex ability, plus it was created out of the purest form of poison, true poison. Make no mistake, the true poison that Felix kept using was merely a downgraded version of the real deal. It was extremely powerful as it enabled him to kill off anyone that interacted with it, but it was nowhere near the real deal. True poison that Hormongandra used in his battles was powerful to the point it was able to poison the body, the mind, and the soul. Felix was merely at the first level. To master the real 9 Steps of Damnation, I need to upgrade my true poison to the last level. Felix was already educated a great deal about true poison and all the abilities he could create of it. He chose to make 9 Steps of Damnation his goal since it was one of the few poisonous abilities capable of killing off primogenitors. As his master explained, 9 Steps of Damnation was separated into 3 levels. When it hit the enemy, his body would be assaulted by the most wicked combination of inducements that were capable of erasing any physical substance. This alone was enough to obliterate 99.99999% of people without poison immunity. Still, after taking 3 steps and the opponent was still breathing, his mind would be targeted next. For the next 3 steps, his mind would be attacked by the most hideous concoction of mind-affecting inducements. Because the body would already be ruined from the first 3 steps, there was almost absolutely no doubt of him surviving this level. But, there were always special beings in this universe and the primogenitors were part of this group. This meant, they were one of the few proud ones capable of reaching the final 3 steps. At this level, even primogenitors had to make an early appointment with death as their souls would be the next target. In this universe, anyone with the ability to affect the soul negatively was to be feared. Hormongandra was respected and feared by his peers because he wasn't just able to affect the soul negatively, but completely poison it permanently. This meant even if the target had survived the last 9th step, he would be destined to live a life of damnation as Hormongandra would literally own his soul. There was nothing to do about it as one's soul meant one's life. Whether it was a primogenitor or a commoner, the moment their soul was poisoned by true poison, their lives could be ended with a mere snap of a finger. This was the real terror of poison at its peak potential, and even though it was Felix's first element, he had yet to tap into it. Oh, as for Thor's death at his 9th step? It was an automatic execution carried on the moment he cracked Hormongondra's skull with Mjolnir. This meant that even when the user of 9 Steps of Damnation was killed off, the enemy would merely hasten his death instead of freeing himself. In other words, there was absolutely no counter to this ability. For the next 500 years, Felix's goal was to reach the 3rd level of true poison and hopefully learn the 9 Steps of Damnation. 1,000 years later, Felix could be seen sitting at the highest point on a dune, seemingly admiring the crimson sunset in utter silence. He wasn't wearing a shirt, exposing his fair-skinned chiseled chest that didn't seem to have gotten even a bit tanner after he spent almost 500 years in the desert. I have mastered all the known omnipotent sand spells and lesser spatial spells. Plus, a greater spatial spell. Felix murmured, I guess my journey here has come to an end. Felix spent the first 500 years in the Mire Marauders focusing completely on his poison manipulation as he planned. During it, he mastered many new poison abilities, increased his manipulation range to match his water manipulation range, enhanced his physical strength by adding another dragon mark, and most importantly, he mastered the 3rd level of true poison. It was a very productive training period as his poison element could be considered to have reached the same level as his other elements with the addition of a couple of abilities that utilized the third level of true poison. As for 9 steps of damnation, Felix learned only half of it and was still struggling with the other half as it was an incredibly complex ability. Knowing that it would take him much more time to master, Felix decided to embark on a journey toward the Desert Wind Clan to focus on his sand spells and spatial spells. After spending another 500 years, he had concluded his training as there were no more sand or spatial spells to master. Obviously, there were still many greater space spells, but Felix didn't want to spend decades grinding for another one when he still needed to work on his gemstone and thunder manipulations. 1,000 years was a long period of time, but because he was in the Elementals galaxy, there weren't really any exciting things going to make the time go slower. The moment Lord Hesha's conquest was ended, nothing out of interest had occurred in the continent and most elementals were pretty content with their mundane peaceful lives. Even the Scorchlanders managed to integrate back into the continent as one of the peaceful tribes, allowing them to commence trades and even hang out with elementals from the bordering tribes like the conflict had never happened. This sort of peace had helped Selphie, Bodadai, and Olivia too with their advancements. Finally, you are going to change the scenery. I can't bear to look at a sand dune for another second. Asna complained with an annoyed tone. I feel the same. Felix chuckled. However, just as Felix wanted to teleport back to the Wind Clan village, Fenrir suddenly informed everyone with a serious tone, Noah has made up his mind to break through the next morning. This news caught everyone by surprise as it came without a single warning. Is he for real? Felix asked with a solemn look, knowing that this was a massive step to take and there would be no return after taking it. The moment you attempt to break through Origin Realm, you either succeed or die, there was no in between. I already confirmed it with him and he has made up his mind on tomorrow. Fenrir answered. What about you? Do you think he is ready? Lady Sphinx asked. All I know is that he has worked incredibly hard to prepare himself. Whether he is ready or not, that's up to him. Upon hearing this, no one asked any more questions and decided to travel to the North Pole to attend this historical event. All of them knew that whether Noah succeeded or failed, he would be the first human to attempt to break through the Origin Realm while using a primogenitor's bloodline. With one request from Elder Stravi, Felix and his party were teleported to the exact location of Noah. So damn cold. Bodadai yelped in pain the moment he opened his eyes to the sight of a hazardous blizzard with a wind speed of 500 km per hour. They were standing near the highest peak of the North Pole, which was also the coldest point on the entire planet. This environment was simply inhabitable and if it wasn't for Noah's immunity to coldness, he wouldn't have spent a single year here. Heat flowers. Selphie used a fire spell to create a couple of floating fire flowers around them to increase their warmth. Then, they walked towards the highest point of the mountain, allowing them to see with great difficulty a snowman sitting in a meditation position. When Fenrir saw Felix and his party, he intercepted them midway and warned, Noah is in the zone right now, preparing for tomorrow. We understand. Felix nodded with a stern look. Lady Sphinx waved her hand and created a humble-sized sand house with furniture and even a door. She invited everyone inside and closed it shut, relieving them from the cold almost instantly. Eeeeeeee! Nemo jumped outside of a void rift and joined them by sitting on Felix's shoulder. Lady Sphinx glanced at him getting patted by Felix without a change of expression. An entire millennium went by and Lady Sphinx still hadn't given up on Nemo's awakening theory even when her peers caved in a long while ago. Who could blame them? Nemo acted the same as always every single day while he was being watched by their piercing eyes. Yet, nothing out of the ordinary occurred, making them quit one by one until only Lady Sphinx remained. They tried at the start to convince her to let it go. Unfortunately, when Lady Sphinx got obsessed with something, she never stopped until she saw it through. Without this attitude, she wouldn't be collecting the maniacal monoliths. Since we will be waiting for first light, mind telling us how he prepared for this moment? Lady Sphinx asked, not giving Nimmo any more attention for now. Life or death situations, many life or death situations. Fenrir answered, all I can say is that he was near death's door more than you can number. If Fenrir stated that they were life or death situations, it only meant that he left Noah to his own devices during his exploration. The North Pole wasn't a safe region in the slightest, as it was packed with strong creatures just like the Third Ocean. The Dawn Behemoths had taught Felix a strong lesson that this planet's creatures weren't to be underestimated one bit. It must have been tough. Olivia murmured. It was tough but necessary to build his will against death. Felix replied, only those who no longer fear death and are willing to come face to face with it have a shot of breaking through the origin realm. Olivia bit her lips in silence, as she knew that the time she spent here was nowhere as dangerous as Noah's. In other words, she could forget about her breakthrough unless she planned on using the cheat method by relying on Lady Yggdrasil's help. The inaugural upload of this chapter took place via /n/ov/l/b/in. I know that he worked extremely hard to do a natural breakthrough, but I really feel like it's going to be too hard for him. Selphie interjected with a worried tone, he is using a method that is created to devour a bestial bloodline with his 1% human bloodline that was powered by other bestial bloodlines. Is it really going to work? Everyone already knew about this and couldn't help but knit their eyebrow tightly. They understood that the circumstances were entirely different, which meant that even with Noah's insane preparation, they may not be enough. This would be fine if Noah allowed Fenrir to help him during the breakthrough, but he told him that he would rather die in the process than end up breaking through because Fenrir suppressed his bloodline. We will find out tomorrow, Fenrir said one last time before exiting the house. The next morning, everyone could be seen standing around Noah without crowding him. Noah was the same after this long period of time when it came to his appearance and attitude. However, those with good eyes were able to pick up a dangerous glint in his icy cold eyes. A glint that spoke volumes above his experiences and the harsh life he had to go through to reach this point in time. Without saying a single word of greeting or anything to Felix's party, Noah closed his eyes shut and began attempting to break through the origin realm. He is starting, Felix commentated after noticing that Noah's body heat was on the rise. This was the first indication that a bloodliner had committed to breaking through, since it marked the moment when the bloodliner had finally decided to rebel against the foreign bloodline and flush it out of his system. Since Fenrir's bloodline was capable of fighting for itself, it would never remain passive while it was being forced to leave the host. Arg! Noah let out a painful grunt from his throat after Fenrir's bloodline rebelled against him and started attacking every single thing related to his human bloodline. This caused Noah's body to start falling apart in real time, causing the girls to cover their mouths at the sight of his skin melting while releasing hot steam. I don't think he is winning, Asna noted. He isn't even fighting. Lady Sphinx frowned at Noah's rapid health deterioration. She had studied many breakthroughs of other bloodliners, making her establish repetitive key points that separated the ones that succeeded and those that failed. The ones that succeeded only went through this painful stage after the 24 to 48 hours due to their human bloodline being able to fight back and even gain control over their bestial bloodline at a gradual pace. The ones that failed? Well, Noah's situation was the perfect demonstration, as it was showing that his human bloodline was absolutely worthless before Fenrir's bloodline. It doesn't matter how much he worked on his will through life or death experiences. That is merely the tool to help him win the fight between the bloodlines. Lady Sphinx explained with a heavy tone, in this case, there isn't even a proper fight in the first place. In other words, Noah had brought with him the gloves to the ring but had no fighter to wear them. *T, he is going to die this way. Felix's face turned for the worst, knowing that Noah literally had minutes or even less before his body turned into a nasty, disgusting goo, representing destruction on a cellular level. He either uses the cheat method to carry on the breakthrough or he dies. Thor stated with a serious look. Fenrir, you have to help him out. Hormungandr stressed, this is not a question of whether he can do it or not anymore. The initial instance of this chapter being available happened at N0, Vel, B, J, N. Everyone knew that he was right. If Noah had the slightest chance of pulling this off on his own, none of them would have said anything, but this wasn't what was happening before them. To make matters worse, time clearly wasn't in their favor as Noah was falling apart way too fast. Selfie, slow down the time for him. Lady Sphinx said after seeing that Fenrir hadn't replied to them. All right. Selfie did as she was told, casting a time-slowing sphere around Noah, causing everything inside to move at 50/1 time different. This drastically slowed Noah's body self-destruction, allowing Fenrir to think carefully about his next decision. Clearly, he was conflicted as his interference meant that Noah had literally gone through hell in the past years for absolutely no reason. There has to be another way. Fenrir turned to Lady Sphinx and requested for her help with his eyes. Without saying anything, Lady Sphinx paused all of her clones' experiments throughout the entire universe and gave them one task: finding a different solution for Noah's breakthrough. With this much brain power on one problem, Lady Sphinx managed to get many new ideas, each with a different amount of success chance. In the end, she chose one idea that seemed to be the best of them all. If he wants to win this alone, there is absolutely no way of it happening with his weak human bloodline. However, Lady Sphinx looked at Fenrir and stated, instead of completely shutting down your bloodline, you can help him by controlling the amount of bloodline he would be fighting at each time. Leveling the fighting ground again, that's smart. Felix expressed with an elated tone. He understood that Noah's problem was that he wasn't being given a chance to fight. With this method, he would be able to defend his bloodline and even try to devour Fenrir's bloodline. It would be slow as hell and a long battle of attrition, which would most definitely put a massive toll on Noah, but this is the only way he has left. Lady Sphinx stressed. Fenrir thought about it for a moment as he eyed Noah and knew that it was the only way forward. So, without delay, he told Noah about it while controlling his raging bloodline to make the fight even. In a sense, instead of Noah having to deal with the entire 99% at once, he would be handling 1% or 2% at each time and in a gradual process. The moment Fenrir finished, he nodded at Selfie. Release. Selfie cancelled her time-slowing sphere, causing Noah's body to return to its self-destruction process. Arg. But, everyone noticed a drastic difference as Noah was now capable of reacting to the destruction, making it slow down to the limit. It's working. Lady Sphinx said, now, it all depends on him. No more help was offered as everyone kept watching Noah go through the most hellish experience in his life. Replacement process and integration had nothing against Origin Realm breakthrough since the body wasn't just changing at a cellular level, but the host also needed to fight for the sake of this change happening. It was like someone working in favor of having his ass kicked. This was where one's will to live played a massive role as not everyone was capable of going through that process. The fact that it lasted usually from 2 to 3 days made it even more dreadful. But in the case of Noah, 4 days went by and he had just managed to devour 30% of Fenrir's bloodline and turn it into his own. Just like a cornered rat, the more he devoured Fenrir's bloodlines, the more ferocious and destructive it became. This is just too brutal. Felix stated with a stern tone as he eyed the blood-covered and barely breathing Noah. His slowly shattering soul could be seen in his dim pupils. Everyone knew that Noah still had 70% more or so, which translated to at least 6 days more of this continuous torture. Just this thought alone was enough to make anyone give up midway in despair, but not Noah. Grace, Grace. He kept repeating in his mind like a broken record as he envisioned his little sister's smile before his dim eyes. As her big brother, Noah knew that he had failed in protecting and giving her the best life she deserved to make it up for the nightmarish childhood they lived. He failed once and he had no intention of failing again even if it meant having his nervous system fried from the pain first before he dies. Hours went by and then days. Signs of tiredness began appearing on Bodhi, Selfie, and Olivia as they were awake for more than 10 days straight. Yet, not a single one of them dared to complain. How could they complain when Noah was in front of them, still hanging on to a thin line for his dear life? They couldn't really see him as he was hidden under a giant pile of snow, but they could still feel his existence. "Keep it up, you are at the last 1%. Fenrir encouraged. "Grace, Grace, Grace." Noah's mind was way too deep in the zone to hear anything he said. Even if he heard him, he probably would have ignored it as the only thing on his mind was his sister's name on repeat. It was actually the only thing that was keeping him hanging on to his life, as each time he said her name, his motivation was restored like he used a magic spell. By now, he had said her name more than 1,000,000 times. Rumble! Rumble! Abruptly, a thunderclap boomed in everyone's ears, causing the girls and Bodadai to almost yelp out loud in fright. The three of them lifted their heads to look at the cloudy sky in confusion as it didn't have a single lighting flash in it. As for Felix and the rest, they didn't look above them but at Noah, who was still buried in the snow. "He did it, the madman actually did it," Felix murmured with a dazed look, knowing that the thunderclap was nothing but a celebration of Noah's historical achievement by the universe itself. Fenrir swiftly removed the piling snow with a single wave of a hand, causing Noah to be exposed to everyone. When they saw his new appearance, every one of them was left utterly stunned. Noah! Even Fenrir and Lady Sphinx were left astounded by Noah's appearance. His white fur appeared to sparkle in the dim moonlight, almost as if it were infused with some sort of supernatural energy. His body was massive, with broad shoulders and muscular muscles vibrating beneath his fur. His two silver orb-like eyes might be dim and unfocused, but they were emitting an intense fierceness. Despite his vicious aspect, there was a certain beauty to the way Noah sat still under the dim moonlight and never-ending snowstorm. Such aura was identical to Fenrir, who was standing next to him. It was quite weaker, but any random person would have great difficulty separating both of them unless he took a close look at their faces. Unbeknownst to what happened to him, Noah finally gave in to the exhaustion after the pain disappeared. Thud! He fell face first on the snow and murmured his sister's name one last time before losing consciousness. A couple of minutes later, Felix's party could be seen inside Lady Sphinx's sand house while Noah slept on a custom-sized bed near them. "I knew that Origin Realm bloodliners resemble the owner of the last bloodliner they devoured, but it shouldn't be by this much, right?" Olivia wondered. It must be because of the other bloodlines' genes not being at the same level as Fenrir's genes, causing them to get absolutely dominated in terms of mutations. Lady Sphinx disclosed. Everyone nodded in agreement as this made the most sense. Other origin bloodliners usually receive 3 or 4 mutations from their previous bloodlines while having the last one's mutations as the majority. In this case, it was clear that Fenrir's genes were too overbearing for other mutations from beasts to dare appear in its presence, especially when Noah had used beasts with Fenrir's bloodline within them in the first place. Fenrir's genes might be dominating heavily, but he is still considered a human. Lady Sphinx stated, right now, he could be considered a new human variation with complete control over 100% of his bloodline. Other origin bloodliners receive all unlocked abilities permanently plus a massive all-rounded strength enhancement. Felix asked with a serious tone. Noah must have received the same things. But since he used a primogenitor's bloodline, do you think he might have gotten Fenrir's gifts? This thought was always on Felix's mind ever since he heard about primogenitors. He understood that origin bloodliners receive only the best of the best from the last bloodline they devoured. That's why origin bloodliners' spiritual pressure became much higher and their lifespan might even increase explosively if they devoured a bloodline from a species known for longevity. The primogenitors' best gifts were obviously their inscriptions, high intelligence, consciousness prowess, insane physical strength, and immortality. Even when Felix used 6 primogenitors' bloodlines, he merely got their inscriptions and it was because they bestowed it to him. Felix never bothered to think too much about this as he knew that the only way to find out the answer was through reaching the origin realm. Now that Noah had done that, it was finally time to uncover the truth. 10 hours later, Noah finally regained consciousness and sat next to his master, making them seem like twins. Everyone looked at Noah with solemn expressions as they could feel an intense spiritual pressure hitting them once in a while. If it wasn't for Fenrir and Lady Sphinx keeping Noah's spiritual pressure in order, he would have caused Felix and his party to lose consciousness instantly. His spiritual pressure isn't as good as primogenitors, but it is near them. Felix murmured with a look of wonder, he has jumped from a mere human to someone at the very top of the pyramid, this is just mind-blowing. This sign made Felix hopeful about Noah getting the rest of Fenrir's gifts. How do you feel? Lady Sphinx asked. Weird. Noah murmured as glanced at his snow-white furry paw. In which way? Like my body doesn't belong to me. That must be from the drastic changes in your body occurring at once. Lady Sphinx comforted him. Noah nodded in understanding. Let's go to a better area for testing. Lady Sphinx said as she scanned him from top to bottom like he was a delicious candy, I need to know everything about your breakthrough. Noah could only agree silently. This time Bodadai used his portal to teleport them back to the Northern Forest's personal training ground. The moment they exited the portal, Chief Cloverus and Chieftess Sunflower manifested in front of them. The origin of this chapter's debut can be traced to N0V3LB, J, N. Welcome back. Chieftess Sunflower said with a gentle tone. I see the whole squad has grouped up. Must be something special. Chief Cloverus said as he eyed Noah, noticing that he had made a 180-degree change in almost everything. We will find out soon. Felix said as he beamed many testing machines around the training ground. Before he starts the tests, we need other results to compare to. Lady Sphinx eyed Fenrir, clearly asking him to do the tests first. Fine. Fenrir agreed and walked to the physical strength testing machine first. Make sure to go all out. Lady Sphinx said as she had a holographic notepad before her. She might have perfect memory, but she still preferred to write things down. Fenrir tightened his fist as he stared at the red pad expressionlessly. Felix and the others watched with great attentiveness as this was the first time they were going to witness a primogenitor using his full physical strength in real life. It was serious as it would give them a real measurement of their current level compared to at least Fenrir. Unfortunately, the situation didn't develop as they had anticipated. In a split second, Fenrir disappeared from his location and returned to it while having his fist stretched forward and emitting a chilling blue smoke. Boom! Before anyone could react to this godly speed, their eyes were drawn to the testing machine that was turned into a dark dusty cloud. It had gotten erased from the sheer destructiveness behind that punch as it wasn't even given a chance to calculate or get thrown away by the force. Felix had no words to explain what he had just witnessed as he could only stare at Fenrir with widened eyes. His reaction was understandable as he always believed that he was 300 kbf or so away from the base physical strength of primogenitors. After this sight, he completely erased that thought as he knew that the testing machine was able to calculate up to 900 kbf without getting damaged. For it to turn into dust only meant that Fenrir should be above 1.4 million bf. We need UVR to measure your physical strength accurately. But, it isn't really that important as I have gotten what I needed. Lady Sphinx wrote a number in her notepad. Do I need to carry on the rest of the tests? Fenrir asked expressionlessly. No need, I don't want you to break any more machines. Lady Sphinx looked at Noah and said, you're next. Still a bit shaken from Fenrir's demonstration, Noah walked towards a newly beamed physical testing machine while glancing at his master. Is it possible that I have gotten that much stronger too? Noah thought as he kept tightening his fist and opening it up, feeling slightly dreamy. He already looked like him and even his consciousness prowess had gotten even better than Felix's. It wasn't far-fetched to think that he might actually get closer in terms of physical strength to his master. Too bad, reality hit him just as hard as his punch landed on the red pad. Boom! The punching form was exquisite, and the noise was thunderous, yet, the machine wasn't even moved. Before Noah could feel disappointed in himself, the machine stopped calculating the force behind the punch. When he read it, even his expressionless face couldn't help but crack from sheer disbelief. 570,487 BF. You gotta be sting me. Felix reacted the same as his eyes were affixed on the magnificent number that surpassed even his own. Felix had barely reached 500,000 BF after spending his entire life going through the worst painful experiences. Noah had come from behind and surpassed him with a single move, allowing him to jump from around 60k BF to more than 500,000. Still, Felix's initial shock didn't turn into spite but utter excitement at the notion that he would be getting the same or even higher enhancement during his breakthrough. This is nuts! Selfie exclaimed, how can this even be allowed? It's not allowed. Lady Sphinx said calmly, that's why the universe reacted to his breakthrough. In other words, this entire experience shouldn't be happening logically. If it was any other person, it was doubtful if they could push through the breakthrough like Noah. After all, he had spent 10 days of continuous torture while most bloodliners couldn't even handle a 5% integration percentage that lasts merely 5 minutes. This was for the real extraordinary humans who were willing to do anything for the sake of strength. Noah had finally gotten rewarded for his intense hard work. If this was his reward, one could only wonder what Felix would be getting after all the experiences he had gone through. But still, isn't a jump from 50k to 550k a bit too much? Selpha said a bit enviously. As a high elf, she might be considered a monstrous talent in spellcasting, but her talent didn't affect her physical strength one bit. She knew that her race could never get such enhancements. It's actually slightly lower than I anticipated. Lady Sphinx shocked everyone with her statement. What do you mean? Fenrir asked. From my understanding of the bloodline integration system, each replacement level gives a small all-rounded enhancement due to having merely 1% human bloodline to accept it. Lady Sphinx explained, but, in the case of Origin Realm, the human bloodline becomes 100% and perfectly merged with the last devoured bloodline, which signified the ability to accept much larger enhancement. If we assume that Fenrir's true physical strength goes beyond 1.5 million BF, then Noah should have logically gotten more than 700k BF increase as his race could be considered now a quasi-primogenitor. When it was put like this, no one felt that the enhancement was too big anymore as they understood that becoming a quasi-primogenitor warranted a much bigger enhancement. After all, Noah didn't just replace his bloodline but actually evolved into another race, which was two whole separate matters. One was using borrowed strength and the other owned said strength. It must be because the breakthrough wasn't 100% natural. Felix suggested. My thought exactly. Lady Sphinx nodded. Everyone knew that the universe was fair and just when it came to rewards/effort. If we considered going through the Origin Realm without anyone's interference as having a 100% clearance rate, then Noah possibly cleared only 80% or so. He received the rewards of such clearance. Still, Noah didn't seem too upset by such information as everyone thought. He knew deep down that he already went beyond his limit to obtain that clearance rate, and if he desired a perfect score, then he was just being a greedy idiot. He gave it his all and was satisfied with the results. Nothing was going to change this fact. What do you think? Asna asked. Noah wasn't able to get a perfect clearance because of his other bloodlines being a hindrance in his breakthrough. Felix answered with a firm tone, but, I don't have such a problem. It won't be fair to not attempt a natural breakthrough. You are saying this even after seeing what Noah went through. That's exactly why I am saying this. Felix narrowed his eyes. If I am going to go through the worst torture in my life, I might as well seek the greatest reward from it. Felix hadn't perfected his bloodline path just to ruin everything at the end line, so, regardless of difficult it was going to be, he was aiming at a natural breakthrough. 2 hours later, Noah had finished almost all of his tests after doing them as thoroughly as possible. The end results had truly confirmed Lady Sphinx's hypothesis that Noah's race could be now considered as a quasi-primogenitor with a human bloodline as the base. He aced the intelligence-based tests as his cognitive reasoning and memory got boosted immensely, giving him similar traits to primogenitors. His consciousness prowess's enhancement affected his mental energy and mental defenses, making him one level above Felix in this department. Reaction speed was also affected positively as it was now closer to Lord Hish's. Even his longevity was tested, making Lady Sphinx realize that Noah might not have obtained true immortality, but he was able to live for billions of years before his body gave in. This was more than enough to convince anyone that Noah's new race could be considered a quasi-primogenitor. Now, to the final and most important test. Lady Sphinx eyed Noah with a solemn look and requested, "Try to create a random ice figure." Noah nodded and gave it a go. He closed his eyes and extended his palm forward while imagining an icy sphere on it. He may not have had ice manipulation before, but he was taught about the principle of creating abilities from Fenrir in anticipation of this day. At the start, it didn't seem that anything would appear on Noah's palm no matter how much he tried. However, before they could start to lose hope, icy particles began to arise bit by bit until a tiny icy sphere was created. It was as small as a marble, but in the eyes of Noah and the others, it was as big as the world. Congratulations, Noah! It really worked. When the rewards will end? Bodhidai stated enviously, humans' cultivation system is really too busted. I got it. Noah murmured with a faint smile as he eyed the icy marble. Ever since his sister's death, nothing made him feel an ounce of happiness. Even his breakthrough merely satisfied him instead of making him ecstatic. However, obtaining ice manipulation was different. The initial instance of this chapter being available happened at N0, Vel, B, J, N. He was happy not for himself but for the fact that he finally could be considered a worthy student of Fenrir. After all, it was really shameful to have the god of ice as your master, but not be able to learn anything about ice. Perfect ice manipulation, he really got it. Felix uttered with a dazed look. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Lady Sphinx said, it might be just limited manipulation. We have to test for it. Noah, try to summon the inscriptions. Fenrir said, all you have to do is think about them. Noah closed his eyes and did as he was told. After waiting for a few minutes, nothing much appeared on his snow fur. I guess you have gotten only limited manipulation. Lady Sphinx noted down. Noah seemed to not mind much on the outside but he was kinda disappointed. No need to feel like that. Fenrir said calmly, perfect manipulation isn't really that important when the only technique we get from it is elemental conversion. Ahm. Noah nodded in understanding. Sure, elemental conversion was extremely useful, but in the case of Noah, he might not need it too much since his elemental tank had increased immensely after his breakthrough. It would allow him to cast any ability and out of any magnitude without problems. With his affinity increasing as well, he could absorb ice elemental energy from the stones much faster. I really thought he will get perfect manipulation. Felix sighed in disappointment. He was feeling this way not for Noah but for himself. He used to think that if it was possible to get perfect manipulation from the breakthrough, then he could pick almost any primogenitor's bloodline as his last without caring if they were alive or dead. After all, alive primogenitors wouldn't mind allowing Felix to use their bloodline when they had no clue that it would give him a copy of their perfect manipulation. This would really broaden his options. It's not decided yet. Lady Sphinx mentioned, there is still a possibility of getting perfect manipulation through a 100% natural breakthrough. It was clear from her test results that Noah's primogenitor's gifts were affected immensely because of his imperfect clearance rate. His immortality was affected, his consciousness prowess was weakened, and the list goes on. So, it was only logical to assume that his manipulation could have been downgraded as well. That's one big if, and I am not going to risk using an alive primogenitor's bloodline to test it out. Felix shook his head, the plan still stands. Well, at least this ensures that you will get destruction limited manipulation if Lord Shiva rejected you. Asna said. I guess that's true. Felix smiled for a moment before frowning, I have to find a way to get it as soon as possible. Felix planned on spending his entire stay in the Elementals Galaxy training and only seeking out the bloodline when he was done with everything. But after seeing Noah's breakthrough, he knew that he couldn't remain patient for another millennium, especially when he wasn't sure yet if this was his last bloodline or not. You better keep thinking, I don't see a way of you getting out of here and return. Before Asna could finish her statement, suddenly the words were stuck in her throat after she felt an intense godly pressure freezing her soul. She wasn't the only one experiencing this sensation, as everyone on the outside and the inside of Felix's mind were put under the same influence, causing each of them to react differently. Lord Zervan has requested your attendance in half an hour. Just as they wanted to react, a cold, distant feminine voice resounded heavily in their minds. Lady Sphinx and the tenants recognized it immediately as they were too familiar with it. Siasim. Lady Sphinx narrowed her eyes coldly, you are as impolite as always. Sphinx, you are as irritating as always. Foremother Siasim replied indifferently. Siasim as in Foremother Siasim. Candace sucked in a deep breath in agitation. Even Felix and Asna felt distressed, as Foremother Siasim's spiritual pressure was simply on another level, as it made them feel like she could literally extinguish their souls with a single word. The only consolation they have was that even the primogenitors were under the same execution sword. It's gone. Just as sudden as it appeared, the pressure went away in the blink of an eye. Prepare yourselves for the meeting. Lady Sphinx stated coldly before walking away. Felix didn't even need to ask about his master's situation, as he already knew that she had bad blood with Foremother Siasim. Foremother Siasim might be in the right for rejecting Lady Sphinx's entry to her galaxy even when she was offered so much, but this didn't mean that Lady Sphinx wouldn't feel irked. Ever since then, Lady Sphinx didn't come eye to eye with Foremother Siasim. It's finally happening. Felix's heartbeats accelerated as nervousness began to take over him at the thought of meeting Lord Zervan. If it was any other primogenitor, he wouldn't have acted like this, but Lord Zervan wasn't any primogenitor. He was the last hope he had to remedy his mistake and save everyone. This meeting was one of the most important moments in his life and he didn't want to mess it up. Noah had the same reaction. Unlike Felix, he couldn't care less about any other earthling as long as his sister was revived. He planned on doing whatever it took to make it happen. Half an hour later, Felix, Noah, Fenrir, and Lady Sphinx were teleported into a beautiful rainforest that seemed to resemble the Amazon jungle greatly. Felix didn't bring the others with him since Olivia had no idea that they planned on requesting Lord Zervan to revive their people. After thousands of years, Olivia had already processed the pain and was living her life normally again. It would be cruel to give her hope and strip it away. That must be it. Felix said as he eyed a humble hut that was covered from top to bottom with vines and moss. Raindrops pelting the thatched roof got louder as they get closer to the house. The building was compact, totally constructed of wood and bamboo, and had a rustic, natural aspect. The supporting beams were encircled by vines and other tropical vegetation, giving the impression that the hut had spontaneously sprung from the forest. When they reached the door, they found out that it was open and welcoming to an aroma of moist dirt flora that filled the interior. The only light in the room was provided by a small, crackling fire in the middle, which created flickering shadows on the unfinished walls. There were only a couple of wooden stools and a table in the functionally minimal room. In one of the corners, a hammock swung and softly swayed in the air. Shelves constructed of woven reeds covered the walls and were filled with diverse items such as carved wooden bowls, a few baskets made of palm fronds, and other handmade equipment. Felix and the others didn't bother to appreciate the calming simplicity of the house, as their eyes had been lured to focus on a man who was sitting near the fireplace. He was moving the burning wood with a long golden rod that was covered with intricate inscriptions. Lord Zervan, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Fenrir and Lady Sphinx bowed their heads without an ounce of disrespect. Felix and Noah copied them hastily, as they knew that when even their masters bow, then they had to offer double the respect. The pleasure is all mine. Lord Zervan smiled kindly as he turned his chair to face them. Hey! When Felix peeked at his appearance, he was taken by surprise as Lord Zervan didn't seem to originate from any species. He had the body of a man with skin as white as marble and eyes that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. He was wearing a long, flowing robe adorned with intricate symbols and patterns that seemed to represent the cycles of time. What threw Felix off was his lion head, hidden golden wings, and most mysteriously, a green glowing snake that seemed to be rolling around his entire body and having its head resting on his shoulder. He seemed more like a chimera, resembling his master Sphinx, but his guts were telling him that he was far from being a chimera. "Welcome back, little one." Lord Zervan smiled gently as he eyed Felix, causing him to be thrown off completely. "Welcome back. What is he talking about?" Felix was left baffled. Maybe he meant to welcome you to his house and made a mistake. Asna tilted her head in confusion. "Don't think too much about it." Lady Sphinx's eyelids twitched. Lord Zervan is known to love messing with people by using such peculiar statements to confuse them. "For real?" Felix asked speechlessly. He believed her since he knew that anyone would be tripped off if someone that could control time were to tell them anything related to their future or past, whether it was a lie or truth. "Haha, looks like she warned you about me." Lord Zervan chortled after seeing Felix's expression turning back to normal. Felix smiled wryly, not knowing how to behave before his eccentricities. "Boy, you can behave like normal. I am not going to revive your people. So, stop fretting about disrespecting me," Lord Zervan said with his usual kind smile as he kept moving the burning logs. His statement had caused the atmosphere to grow stale instantly as even Lady Sphinx and Fenrir was left a bit stunned. They already were pretty certain that Lord Zervan was going to reject Felix's request, but they didn't think that he was going to shut him down in the first 30 seconds of their meeting. He literally shattered their hope before they could build some confidence to voice their request. "Lord Zervan, can you at least hear them out?" Lady Sphinx sighed as she looked at Noah and Felix's soulless expressions. They were hit pretty hard with Lord Zervan's rejection as they had been dreaming about this day for more than a millennium now. They prepared everything to convince Lord Zervan even if it meant begging him. Alas! What's the point? I already know what they are going to say. Lord Zervan said calmly, so, I might as well skip ahead and reject them. Thud. I will do anything you ask. Please bring back my sister, please. I beg you. Without an ounce of hesitation, Noah knelt down with his head on the floor and begged him to reconsider his decision. His eyes were reddened like he was trying his best to hold his tears while his voice was cracking mid-sentence. Dignity? Respect? Noah had no use for such things when the only thing that mattered in his life didn't exist anymore. Boy, you are disrespecting your master by kneeling before another. Lord Zervan advised after seeing Fenrir's frigid expression, you better stand up if you don't want to get punished. Noah tightened his fists but still refused to stand up, making it clear that he was willing to go through any punishment as long as he reached his goal. Lord Zervan lifted Noah up with his mental energy and disclosed with a bitter smile, as much as I want to help both of you, it's really not that simple. What do you mean? Felix asked with a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. As long as it wasn't impossible, then it was doable. Alas, he was going to drop this thought faster than Noah dropping to the ground. You assume that I can rewind the time on your destroyed planet until the point where everyone was still alive. That's the premise. Everyone nodded in agreement. Well, I can do that. Before Noah and Felix could feel giddy, Lord Zervan shook his head. Unfortunately, everyone revived will be merely empty husks without souls to them. This news caused Felix's heart to drop to his stomach as he already could guess where Lord Zervan was going with his explanation. The moment someone dies, his soul becomes a clean slate with everything he has experienced in his life has been erased. So, even if I revived your sister, she won't really be your sister as her soul will be completely new. Lord Zervan shook his head. If you just want her body, there are much easier methods like cloning or such. It can't be. Noah mumbled with an absent-minded look. Even when he was desperate and borderline crazy about his sister's death, Noah was still sensible enough to understand that his sister's soul was what mattered, not her body. If it was already erased as Lord Zervan said, then, there was really nothing to be done. You guys want me to do this to tens of billions of dead people? Not a chance. Lord Zervan said with a stern tone, everyone who experienced death in their lives learns to process their grief and move on. I am certain that everyone has already done this in merely a decade while you boys had more than a millennia. If you can't move on already, that's on you and no one but you. His words made plenty of sense, but they still fell on deaf ears as both Felix's and Noah's situations weren't like most people's. In the case of Noah, his sister was literally his world, and losing her meant having nothing to stand on anymore. As for Felix, he might move on from the death of his grandfather and friends as he has already done this in his previous life, but what was killing him was the fact that he caused their death alongside tens of billions. That wasn't easy to accept by any sane person. Why are you lying to them? I know that you can reverse the flow of time for the spirits to regain their memories. If I didn't know this, I wouldn't have suggested having them come here. Lady Sphinx asked telepathically. I am not lying to them. Lord Zervan replied, I am just not giving them the whole truth. You should appreciate my help as those two boys need to understand that death is the end line. If I help them here, what stops them from coming to me every time someone dear to them dies? Or worse, seek other futile methods. Death is death, life is life. If no one has respect for those basic laws, the whole universe will be thrown into shambles. Lord Zervan uttered indifferently. As the time primogenitor, there was really no such thing as a limitation. Lord Zervan was able to accelerate time in an entire galaxy all by himself, reviving people was nothing but a walk in the park for him. Still, this didn't mean that he planned on abusing his powers for whoever requested his help. He only helped people when there was literally no other option. In the case of Felix and Noah, their situation could be solved by them toughening up and accepting the death of their beloved no matter how hard it was. You really didn't disappoint. Lady Sphinx smiled faintly, I expected you to reject them, but I didn't think you will go the extra mile for their sake. Lady Sphinx might want to protect Felix and help him reach his goals. But in this case, she really had no intention of having him revive anyone as she knew that it would harm him in the long run. The only reason she brought out Lord Zervan in the first place was to give him some motivation to stand up on his feet. Though, Noah and Felix's current situation didn't seem too good as they appeared to be utterly devastated. If you are hellbent on saving them, then pay the spirit realm a visit and see if you can strike a deal with the Guardian of Souls, just stop bothering me with this. Lord Zervan said in a careless manner. While what he said sounded more like a joke, Noah didn't seem to think of it as such. His soulless eyes seemed to have some life restored in them as he murmured, Spirit realm, deal, I can do that. Noah, it's... Felix sighed, forget it. Even Felix, who desired to seek any method to fix his mistake, was still sensible enough to understand that method was impossible. He had witnessed the spirit realm and the heavenly plane. He witnessed its structure, rules, and everything that he needed to understand that anyone who reached that plane was unrevivable. If a soul was still in the void of the spirit realm, there might be a chance to return to its body. However, the moment it stepped on the heavenly plane, it was a done deal. Even Life Primogenitor had stated that he was reviving only the wandering spirits and had no plans on touching the ones on the heavenly plane since they were considered to have already started a new life. There was no way the Guardian of Spirits would ever agree to give up on spirits who already started their new lives in his domain. Even Carbuncle planned on staying with his wife in the spirit realm if it was possible to recover her memories. I guess it's best to leave him with this shred of hope, Thor said as he addressed Noah. He is still too fragile and it's doubtful if he can accept the death of his sister. Kraken advised Fenrir, it's best to help him work things out before this last shred of hope disappears as well. We will see how it goes. Fenrir might not like Noah's current state too much, but he related to it greatly. He also lost his dear wife and it completely made his life fall apart, but, if he could move on in the end, he trusted that Noah would be able to do the same with a bit of help. You okay? Asna asked Felix softly. I am fine. Felix smiled wryly. I already knew that it was a long shot and prepared for failure. Felix might be devastated, but he didn't let his emotions get to him as much as Noah. He made peace with himself that this was his last attempt to fix his mistake and revive everyone. If it failed, he wouldn't look for another method and waste his time on it. Precious time could be used to at least punish the bastards who did this to his loved ones. 1,600 years was enough duration for Felix to mature at a moderate pace and understand that if couldn't save his loved ones, he could at least give them justice. This didn't mean that he was free of guilt, it simply meant that Felix had taken another step towards redemption and acceptance, unlike Noah. Half an hour later, Fenrir had taken Noah outside of the hut to speak with him personally about his current situation. As for Felix and Lady Sphinx, they remained with Lord Zervan and spoke about various things. In truth, Felix didn't do much of the speaking as he merely listened to their rich conversation, trying his best to learn new things. Too bad, most of the things they spoke about had no context, which left him confused most of the time. Lord Zervan, I have been meaning to ask you. Lady Sphinx gave Lord Zervan a serious look and inquired, why did you accept our request to enter your galaxy and even set up a meeting with us? Did you see something? Felix fixed his posture to get more focused as he knew that this question was extremely important. He always wondered about Lord Zervan's reasoning to accept him and even allow him to bring companions. Since he knew that he was the time primogenitor, it was normal to assume that Lord Zervan might have seen something about Felix's future. I am always seeing things, that's not a reason really. Lord Zervan chuckled. Everyone could see that he was avoiding answering the question. Lady Sphinx knew that she couldn't really force him to tell them about his visions of Felix's future. L1 T-Lagoon witnessed the first publication of this chapter on N0 Velbion. So, she played along. If that's not the reason, then what else? She asked. To give him this. Suddenly Lord Zervan threw a weird-looking golden earring at Felix, causing him to catch it reflexively. The earring resembled a sun disk and had some writings on its surface. It was quite heavy considering its size. Lady Sphinx took it from Felix's hand with her mental energy and scanned it thoroughly before asking, is this a spatial earring? Yes, and it can be unlocked only by him. Lord Zervan said. You joking, right? Lady Sphinx frowned as she knew that there was no way he could be telling the truth. Give it a try. Lord Zervan didn't bother to defend himself. Lady Sphinx infused it with her elemental and mental energy. Unfortunately, it didn't react to her at all. She passed the earrings to Felix and told him to do the same. Albeit confused, Felix did as he was told and infused his mental energy into it. Unexpectedly, the inscriptions reacted to it as they brightened up for a few moments. The hell? Felix felt slight shivers coursing down his spine after seeing the earrings being unlocked. Impossible. How can this be? Interesting. His reaction was shared by even his tenants as everyone knew that spatial jewelry was categorized into two types, public and private ones. Public in the sense that anyone could unlock and access them as long as he had the specific elemental energy to unlock them. As for the private type, they were considered customized spatial jewelry since they used the mental energy of the owner as the sole key to open them. Since every person in the universe had a singular unique consciousness and mental energy, it was impossible for anyone to unlock those private spatial rings beside the owner. What freaked out Felix and his tenants was the fact that the owner had to share his mental energy with the forger beforehand for the sake of creating this special bond. Since there was only one Felix and one forger in the universe that was able to create such a divine item, it implied quite a freaky situation. Before you ask, I am not the one giving it to you. Lord Zervan uttered calmly, it was left behind for you by someone. Hey! With this answer, Felix and his tenants were officially thrown off as this was just too random and unexpected. Who? You will know in the future. This. Felix didn't know what to do anymore, as he knew that Lord Zervan could not be forced to confess or even persuaded. Glance inside, there might be some clues. Thor suggested with a serious tone. Okay. Felix took a deep breath and infused a wisp of his consciousness inside the golden urning. The moment he opened his eyes, he felt chills course on his spine at sight before him. His reaction wasn't even close to a sneeze, as her eyes reflected a never-seen level of terror before. Her reaction was understandable, as the dimensional pocket turned out to be exactly the same as the ruins she was sealed inside. A colossal hall that was floored with tiles embedded with colorful gems and walls dyed with amber color. Their bright light illuminated everything with vivid details, showcasing the same soldiers' statues that were standing uprightly at the corners of the hall, each holding a different type of weapon with one arm. Meanwhile, their other arm had a purplish chain rolled up their forearms, clasping on them tightly. Those 4 purplish chains were connected to a small platform at the very center of the hall. Unlike the hall in the ruins, the purplish chain seemed loose. Still, the platform was hovering in mid-air without any support. This time, there was no fist-sized flame on top of the platform. How can this be possible? Felix uttered with a heart burning in agitation. In his previous life, he might not have taken a much closer look at the hall, but he was still able to recognize it immediately with a single glance. This new hall seemed to be the clean and undestroyed version of the ceiling hall. Calm down, this might be just a copy. Lady Sphinx said with a composed tone. She might have been surprised by the ceiling hall, but she always kept her cool in any situation regardless of the abnormalities. It's not a copy. Asna murmured with a dazed look. How can you be so sure? Thor frowned, knowing that couldn't be possible. I spent almost my entire life in the ceiling hall, I know every nook and cranny of it. Asna answered him with a hint of fear in her voice, unless it was copied straight out of my memories, it can't be a copy. Every tenant was left silenced by her response, as they had no idea what to say next. Doubt her? They couldn't do that when she had no reason to lie to them in this freaky situation. Believe her? That also didn't seem much of an option, since it pointed to a much scarier implication than the earring's owner. I don't know, I just don't know anymore. Felix sat on the ground with his temples throbbing painfully, like his brain wasn't able to process this situation at all. He shouldn't beat himself for it, as even the tenants were left utterly confused as well. Let's all take a step back and propose theories to facilitate solving this mystery. Lady Sphinx suggested, easing up the tense mood. I will start. Elder Kraken rubbed his tentacle beard as he shared his opinion. I believe it's their doing. I don't know if they did this to let us know that they are watching us or for the sake of toying with us. Whatever it is, it had to be them. Felix felt his heart skip a beat after those beings were brought up again. My thoughts exactly. Lady Sphinx nodded. This also explains how the urning was made with Felix's mental imprint without him being there. Only those beings are capable of such a thing. Everyone nodded their heads in agreement but Felix, Asna, and Candace. In the case of Candace, she literally had no clue what was going on right now, as she wasn't informed about Asna's situation in too much details. As for Felix and Asna, the notion of being watched by those beings honestly was scaring the living sh*t out of them. Asna was already traumatized by them, while Felix considered them as his final enemies. To know that your future enemies were spying and even toying with you wasn't a good feeling in the slightest. Did they really do this to toy with us? Felix murmured, like they are telling us that her destiny is to be sealed again and nothing we do can change it. This was enough to send goosebumps down anyone's skin. Obviously, everything is mere speculation and we might be way off the truth. Lady Sphinx stressed as she eyed both of them, so, don't lose yourselves to a mere theory. We know. Felix and Ansa understood that nothing positive would come out if they accepted this theory as the iron truth. The origin of this chapter's debut can be traced to N0v3LB, J, N. Since not much evidence supported it, they decided to assume that it was wrong. At least, this way it wouldn't affect their lives negatively too much. Though, this method would leave them with more questions than answers. If this theory isn't the answer, then what else can explain this? Hormungandr knitted his eyebrows. Many theories floated in everyone's minds, like Lord Zervan messing with them after seeing Felix's past and future or something like this. But they kept shooting them down as they were just too preposterous. Lord Zervan might be somewhat of a jokester, but they knew that he would never go this far in his jokes. Let's leave this matter for later discussion. Lady Sphinx said, we don't have enough information to work with, which means not a single theory can be proven true. You're right. Felix sighed heavily as he tried his best to shelve this matter for later. This entire development had really come out of nowhere and caught them off guard. It was best to think about it in their free time as they were still in the presence of Lord Zervan. So? Lord Zervan asked with a curious look after seeing Felix opening his eyes. You really don't know about the earring's content? Lady Sphinx raised an eyebrow at his genuine curiosity. I know a lot of things, but the content of that earring still eludes me. He answered, catching them by surprise. Then, how about a trade? Lady Sphinx proposed, tell us the identity of the person who left you the earring, or at least the period of when it happened. You do know that I can see the future of myself accepting the trade and receiving the information from you without needing to do anything in the present. Lord Zervan chuckled. I know that. I also know that you won't do it. Lady Sphinx smiled, knowing that Lord Zervan almost never abused his powers on others' backs. I could have changed from the last time we spoke. Everything can change but you. Lady Sphinx answered calmly, you are consistent in everything you do, just like time. I can't deny that. Lord Zervan laughed at her response, knowing that she had him figured out completely even though they had merely spoken once telepathically. So, keep your information. Lord Zervan chuckled, since I never knew about the earnings content, it only means it's for the best. Some things are better left unlearned. You sure? Always. Felix had no clue how Lord Zervan's life could be changed by knowing about the sealing hall, since he didn't really have much connection to it, but, if he didn't want to know about it anymore, they couldn't shove it down his throat forcefully. How about the? As I said, you will know in the future. Lord Zervan denied them again of the answers, making Felix sigh in frustration. He knew that the only good clue they had was the identity of the first owner of the earring. What about my companions, then? Why did you allow me to bring them too? Felix changed his question as he knew that if Lord Zervan's real reason for allowing them entry was to hand him this earring, then what's the point of allowing Felix to bring companions? You are thinking too much about this. Lord Zervan chuckled, I just didn't want you to be the only outsider in my galaxy. Felix didn't know if he was telling the truth or gaslighting him again. But, he understood that Lord Zervan wasn't going to give him any useful information. So, he might as well drop it before he annoyed him too much. My job can be considered to be done now. Lord Zervan smiled at them, you can head back if you want. This made it clear to them that Lord Zervan wasn't too interested in their company as much as in doing what he was tasked with. This isn't looking too good. Felix thought with a distressed look. When he first heard about the meeting invitation, Felix planned on seeing if it was possible to request one chance to exit and enter the galaxy. This would help him get the destruction bloodline and return to cultivate it to its best potential, but now, it didn't seem like it was going to work. You should take this issue with Siamese. She already did me a favor by accepting you guys once. I won't ask her again. Lord Zervan answered before Felix could even ask him, which freaked him out as always. I see. Felix smiled wryly after recalling Foremother Siamese's interaction with Lady Sphinx. He knew that it was a long shot if she would even entertain talking to them, don't even mention agreeing to his request. Can you please help us set a meeting with her? Felix requested, knowing that Lord Zervan was their only hope to make a connection with Foremother Siamese. You heard him, right? Lord Zervan said as he looked at the ceiling. Just as Felix wanted to lift his head, he realized that the environment around him had changed completely. He was now standing on a field of dandelions. Each stalk in the field sea of white had a fuzzy ball that appeared to sparkle in the sunlight. The tiny seeds of the dandelions floated through the air like fairy dust as they softly swung in the breeze. The only thing visible as far as the eye could see was an infinite expanse of white. The aroma of spring, a potent blend of flowers and recently cut grass, was pervasive in the air. Felix realized immediately that he was in a dimensional pocket as the sky was dotted with multiple black holes like they were painted on a wall. Before Felix's eyes could roam further, they ended up getting affixed on a mesmerizing purple-haired woman. Her skin was smooth and flawless, with a natural radiance that seemed to glow from within. High cheekbones and full lips gave her face a striking, almost regal appearance. Her eyes were a deep, dark green, sparkling with intelligence and a hint of coldness. She sat at the center of the dandelion field with graceful ease, her every motion fluid and elegant. She dressed simply yet elegantly, emphasizing her body without being too exposing. Despite her evident attractiveness, she exuded an air of superiority that would make anyone feel uncomfortable. "For Mother Siamese?" Felix inquired politely. He noticed that he had been teleported to this dimensional pocket all by himself, which made him understand that Mother Siamese had no intentions of interacting with his master. Still, he wasn't too nervous or afraid of her as he knew that Lord Zervan wouldn't let anything bad happen to his guest. "Come closer," she ordered calmly. Although her tone was impolite as hell, Felix had no plans of acting tough before her. He went closer to her and remained silent, knowing that there was no need to voice his request again. In his mind, since she decided to bring him here, then there was a high chance she would agree to his request. After all, a no would have been sufficient to deal with him. "I will agree to your request for a condition," she disclosed. As expected. Felix took a deep breath and asked, "What is it?" "I want you to never have any interaction with Lord Zervan again." Mother Siamese said coldly, "Don't ask for his help, don't ask for a favor, don't even think about him." Felix was left stunned at her condition. He expected many conditions, but never this. She must be too possessive of Lord Zervan and doesn't want anyone to take his attention from her. Asna chuckled. Although Asna's conclusion seemed like a joke, Felix was really about to believe it since he didn't have any logical reasoning for this condition. Don't ask for his help, don't ask for a favor, don't even think about him? Felix wasn't even planning on doing this after his request was diverted to her. He knew that the moment he leave the galaxy, he would have almost no relation to Lord Zervan. Since he had no more favors to take advantage of, he couldn't even contact him anymore. There is another option. Lady Sphinx narrowed her eyes. She knows about the identity of the earring's owner and understands that having a connection with him meant big trouble to Lord Zervan. So, she decided to protect him by cutting off my relationship with him completely. Felix was speechless as she made him feel like he was a walking magnet for trouble. "It's best if you just ask her," Thor said. Just as Felix wanted to do this, Mother Siamese interjected calmly, "Yes or no, anything else that comes out of your mouth will cancel this offer." This B*TCH is really something else. Asna cursed with an irked tone, not too pleased with Mother Siamese's personality. Unfortunately for them, Mother Siamese couldn't care less about their opinions of her as she had no intentions of making friends with them. She couldn't make it any more obvious that she wanted them out of her celestial body as fast as possible. "So, are you going to take the deal?" Asna asked. "Isn't it obvious?" Felix smiled wryly, "What choice do I have left at this point?" Felix understood that he couldn't miss this opportunity to obtain destruction bloodline while making sure to cultivate it in the Elementals galaxy. The price might be vague in long term, but still, it was worth the trade. Receiving help from Lord Zervan wasn't even 1% guaranteed even with a favor involved. If it wasn't for the earning, he probably wouldn't have accepted Lord Osiris' favor. So, it would be too dumb to reject this secured opportunity to get much stronger for the sake of uncertain assistance. Yes. The moment Felix gave his answer, he was sent back to the northern forest with his party. The only one left behind was Lady Sphinx. Damn, we didn't even get to thank Lord Zervan. She is treating you like a plague. Asna giggled. Felix's eyelids twitched, but he had no retort as he also started to feel the same. Master, can you convey my regards? Felix requested, knowing that Lady Sphinx was left behind because she had other businesses to conduct with Lord Zervan. After receiving confirmation, Felix removed Lord Zervan from his thought process and went to check up on Noah. Meanwhile, back in the hut, Lady Sphinx was staring at Lord Zervan with a solemn expression. Tell me your offer. I already told you there is no need for you to keep collecting them. I can tell you right now what will happen when you gather those monoliths in one place. Lord Zervan said. I also told you that I don't want that. Lady Sphinx replied calmly, I didn't go through so much trouble to gather them just to hear the ending. I want to see it, I want to feel it, and I want to be there for it. You better not spoil anything for me. Lady Sphinx warned with a frigid look. Fine, sheesh. Lord Zervan murmured to himself, no wonder they are named maniacal monoliths. You said something. Lady Sphinx narrowed her eyes at him. Cough, it's nothing. Lord Zervan swiftly threw a spatial ring in her hand and said, there are more than 100 of them there. Siamese gathered them for me and I have no use of them as I already know the answer. This. Lady Sphinx was rarely caught off guard as her rationality always keep her cool-headed. Still, this was way too much for her to take. Receiving 100 monoliths at once wasn't even a dream come true as he never assumed that this many monoliths could be gathered in one place. The origin of this chapter's debut can be traced to N0V3LB, J, N. I can't accept those, it's too much. Lady Sphinx pushed back the spatial ring, she understood that nothing in her possession would make this trade fair. Don't you get it? Lord Zervan chuckled, you have to take them for my desired future to remain unaffected. I see. Although Lord Zervan didn't go into much detail, Lady Sphinx understood what he meant. Lord Zervan knew the answer about the monoliths through the future Lady Sphinx. In other words, she managed to gather all of the monoliths in the far future and she shared the knowledge with everyone as usual. If she didn't accept those monoliths right now, the future would change, which would result in Lord Zervan's memories about the monolith's answer being erased since it never happened. Thank you. No, thank you. Lord Zervan smiled as he watched Lady Sphinx take the ring. I know I said I don't want to know, but is it possible to know if the end results are worth it or not? Does it matter to you? I believe you won't stop either way. I guess you're right. Lady Sphinx smiled as she eyed the spatial ring. As the guardian of truth and knowledge, Lady Sphinx would never base her effort on the subject's worth. If that's the case, it was best to not learn anything about the monoliths no matter how tempting it was, especially, when she needed only 19 monoliths more to collect them all. 1 month later. Felix could be seen sitting on the floor of his training hall inside his spaceship. He was currently getting close to the wormhole connecting the Elemental Galaxy and the SG Alliance. He embarked on the journey toward Lord Shiva's descendants the day after his meeting with Lord Zervan. Without having the destruction bloodline, Felix didn't feel motivated in the slightest to continue his training. So, he left as early as possible. He didn't take anyone with him besides Nemo since the deal included only himself. The others had no permission, so if they dared to leave the galaxy, they would never be accepted inside again. Sir Felix, we are about to reach our destination. Queen AI suddenly informed, interrupting Felix's meditation. Felix opened his eyes and teleported to the cockpit instantly, making him see thousands of spaceships entering and leaving a cosmic wormhole. You back, alone this time? You got ditched. Elder Hemir spoke telepathically with Felix the moment he got too close to the wormhole. I have matters to settle outside. I will be back soon. Felix replied politely. For you to get approved entry twice, you are really well liked by the foremother. Something like that. Felix's eyelids twitched, having no plans on telling him that she hated him more than anything. Elder Hemir released a faint grunt in distrust at Felix's statement and went radio silent on him. Felix enjoyed this silence during his stay in the queue. After a couple of hours, his spaceship's turn arrived to pass through the wormhole. 16 years since I have gone off the radar in the Alliance. Felix smiled faintly as he went through the wormhole. I wonder how much has changed. 1,600 years in the elemental galaxy translated to merely 16 years in the outside universe. While the time difference couldn't be compared at all, Felix knew that more *T must have happened in the Alliance during that period. The SG Alliance was that lively and dramatic. Ting ting ting. As expected, the moment Felix emerged on the other side of the wormhole, his AP bracelet went absolutely haywire with millions of notifications pinging him one after another. Even Asna and the other tenants' bracelets went crazy with notifications, causing Felix's limbs to keep vibrating like he was wearing massage devices. Mute all. Felix requested. Notifications muted. Queen AI added monotonously, Welcome back online Sir Felix. Thanks. Felix smiled as he heard Queen AI's same old voice, but this time, he knew that it was the real Queen AI. Sir Felix, are you willing to trade your information gained in the elemental galaxy? Queen AI proposed. No, thank you. Felix rejected the offer even though he knew that the payment would be mouth-watering. This offer was also offered to Asna and the tenants since the information was too vital to Queen AI. She always sought to absorb new data as it empowered her consciousness prowess in addition to making her more knowledgeable. Understood. Although she desired his knowledge, Queen AI still accepted his will without trying to convince him like some annoying merchant. Queen. Log me in. Asna requested with an eager tone without wasting a single second. Who could blame her? She spent 1,600 years doing nothing but watching Felix grinding in his training with the occasional visits from him to do the naughty. Anyone would be bored to death. The moment she logged in, she went to the spa to clear her mind and sunbathe near the pool. I will be tending to my garden. Hormungandr said with a faint smile as he logged in too. Meanwhile, Thor and Carbuncle went to their favorite bar while Kraken returned to his mission of collecting information to benefit his main consciousness which was in the spirit realm. When Lady Sphinx saw that the crowded and lively table was emptied, she couldn't help but shake her head like a displeased mother. They are really getting too addicted. When she focused back on Felix, she saw that he was already lying inside his VR pod. Though Felix straightaway opened the news outlet, his inbox, and his contact list, wanting to get into business instead of entertaining himself. When he realized that there was just too much news to understand at once, he requested Candace to update him only on the big events that happened in his absence. The biggest news is related to us. Candace disclosed with a proud tone, the Void Nation has managed to dethrone the Sage race and becomes one of the 10 ruling powers in the previous Great Reset. Well, that's good to hear, but really not worth celebrating. Felix sighed, it would have been better if we managed to dethrone another race. It made sense for Felix to not feel too happy about this news since the Sage race belonged to them too. With Arthur still being the king of the Sages, it would have been much better if both of them remained in the top 10 rulers. Unfortunately, the Sage race was the 10th on the list and if the Void Nation wanted to join the Alliance's peak, they had to start with them. I think it's been 6 years in this new cycle. Have you made any progress? Felix asked the real question. As you know, the Watchers race are permanent members in the top 10. So, although they are 9th in the ranking, we had to skip over them and aim for the 8th ranked. Candace disclosed, we believe that we will be able to surpass the Heavenly Turtles in the next 3 years before the Great Reset. That's quite fast. Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise. How are you gaining so many SG points? Felix knew that the Heavenly Turtles might be ranked 8, but the points difference between them and the Sages was in the millions. That's because they were dominating the racial games just like the dragons. So, for the Void Nation to catch up to them in merely 6 years, they must have really put in the effort. After we stabilized our nation in our new home, we have decided to start offering our services in return for SG points. Candace smiled. Almost every background in this universe is suffering from daily void invasions. Since we proved to be able to take care of them, everyone is fighting to hire our services. Adding this to the mandatory quota, we will be getting indeed plenty of SG points. Felix nodded in satisfaction at his nation's activeness. He believed that his nation would be doing just the mandatory quota of dealing with 3 void invasions each month. He didn't think that the citizens would be motivated to even work harder than that and start accepting private commissions. Since SG points were used as currency between nations, this was greatly helpful to his nation. Of course, they will work hard. It is one of the fastest methods for the citizens to climb the ranks in the nation's hierarchy and obtain more territories. Candace chuckled devilishly as it was one of her plans to increase productivity. Felix approved of this 100%. Oh, also, we created a new hidden organization for all sorts of private requests, ranging from assassinations to even fulfilling some weird kinks or wishes through greed laws. Candace added. Seriously? Felix frowned. You tell the clients about the aftermath, right? Of course, this is the only way we managed to make the organization be accepted by the inner circle and approved by the Queen. Candace nodded. Everyone knows what they are getting into when they make those requests. You still get commissions. You have no idea. Candace smiled wryly. We are actually at capacity and we have commissions stacked for the next 2 years. The F***ck is wrong with people. Felix was left speechless. Felix knew that the void creature's powers come with some nasty penalties. L1T Lagoon witnessed the first publication of this chapter on N0 Velbion. For example, if a lust succubus was hired to fulfill some weird kink, the utilization of the lust law on that person would corrode his consciousness. If it was just once or twice, maybe it wouldn't matter much since consciousness could recover with time. But, those void succubus knew what they were doing and Felix understood that the moment someone have a taste of their divine techniques, there was no turning back. This meant they were literally signing and paying to turn themselves into sex slaves. This still wasn't worse than asking for a wish by using greed laws. Just like trade with the devil, no matter how small the wish, the penalty was always 100 times much worse. I was freaked out as well. Candace joked, if I knew many people were this sick in their minds, we wouldn't have been moving in the shadows and forcing ourselves on them. I don't know, this still feels off. Felix waved his hands, just don't overdo it to avoid getting us a bad reputation. I understand. Felix might be sickened by this organization's operations, but he had no plans of disbanding it, especially, when the clients were giving their consent even after knowing about the risks. How about the human race? Felix changed the subject. Any news? I am sorry, I have tried my best to give them a hand, but it still wasn't enough to save them from having their rank falling sharply. Candace sighed. Upon hearing so, Felix opened the SG Alliance ranking and couldn't help but sighed in frustration after seeing that the human race rank was back to 28. Tisk, so much effort gone to waste the moment I disappeared. That's to be expected. You were the whole team. Asna replied lazily while getting massaged by humanoid bots in a private spa. Felix sighed as he closed the holographic ranking list. He understood that as long as he didn't help the human race as a whole to advance their strength, they would always rely on him to advance higher in the alliance. As much as he wanted to help them solve this issue, he really wasn't free to invest all of his time in finding such a miraculous method. After all, what he needed to do was either create a new cultivation system or improve the old one. None of them were easy to achieve. Since I will be returning to the Elementals Galaxy, it's useless to help them push their rank higher again. Felix made his decision to ignore them for now, knowing that they wouldn't be kicked out of the inner circle even without his help. Though, the same couldn't be applied to his personal Empyrean rank. 16 years of absence really took a considerable amount of Empyrean points. He commentated as he eyed his newly downgraded Empyrean rank. Though, he didn't seem to mind it too much as he knew that with his current strength, he could easily smash through the ranks and reach the top 10 Supremes. Are you planning to aim for the top 10 while you are here? Asna inquired. Top 10. Felix smirked coldly. I have an appointment with Elder Dragon and it will be too impolite to keep him waiting much longer. A bit too confident, aren't you? Asna giggled. It's doubtful if I can handle him properly right now. But after my 6th replacement. Felix narrowed his eyes. I will make him regret the day he looked down on me. Felix could never forget the humiliation he had to go through during his first meeting with Elder Dragon. He was held at a gunpoint to sign a non-disclosure agreement to keep the ugly secrets of the royal dragon family to himself. The contract stated that the moment his tongue slipped up, Queen Ai would terminate his existence instantly. When he rejected to sign it, Elder Dragon attempted to kill him without an ounce of hesitation. If it wasn't for his master's interference, he wouldn't be standing here. Ever since then, Felix vowed that he would dethrone the Elder Dragon of his supreme title as the strongest being in the alliance. He would do it in the most humiliating manner possible to pay him back. Focus first on securing the destruction bloodline. Thor stated calmly, it won't be easy to deal with Lord Shiva's descendants. I know full well about their legends. Felix narrowed his eyes in focus, the legends of the Watchers. It turned out, the Watchers were Lord Shiva's descendants. A piece of knowledge that only a few authoritative figures knew about. For everyone else? The Watchers were a secretive and private race who almost never interfered in the Alliance's matters even though they were the only permanent members in the top 10. But in reality, Felix knew that even the Watchers term was a mere nickname given to them in the old days due to doing nothing but watching from afar. Their real name was Shiva's Apostles. N0v3L Realm was the platform where this chapter was initially revealed on N0v3L.B1N. With Felix's authority in the Alliance, he had access to almost all types of private information in the data center. From there, he learned about the history of Shiva's Apostles during the Dark Age and the first years of the Scalliance's foundation. It was a known fact that the UVR and the SG Alliance were created for the sake of minimizing wars in the real universe. While the dragons, shadowborns, orcs, dwarves, and almost every other race were fighting for the sake of resources or their survival, there were only two untouched races. The Metal Race and Shiva's Apostles. One race had the most advanced military technologies in the universe while the other race was considered one of the most fearsome races in the entire universe, surpassing even the dragons. Even when there was no UVR during the Dark Age, rumors about Shiva's Apostles traveled far and wide as every race that targeted their territories always had one survivor leaving in one piece. Vampires, werewolves, heavenly turtles, and even dragons gave it a shot to conquer them and failed. Those lone survivors did their jobs by spreading the news about the damnation of their people to everyone. When Felix read the survivors' statements in those history books, all of them mentioned repeatedly that Shiva's Apostles had erased their people, their weapons, and their spaceships with a mere look. With enough information from multiple victims, it was getting harder and harder to disbelieve them. Since Shiva's Apostles never tried to conquer anyone, the only way to prove those insane rumors was by entering their territory. Unfortunately, not a single background dared to risk themselves for the sake of everyone's curiosity. This caused Shiva's Apostles' fearsomeness to get inflated through the years even though there was nothing to document their strength besides the words of those survivors. When the day of the Scalliance's foundation arrived, they were invited to join as one of the top 10 most important races in the Alliance. When the rules were written to make sure that everyone would have a chance to become one of the top 10 races, Shiva's Apostles were the only ones excluded. No one had any arguments about this sort of favoritism as Shiva's Apostles' terrifying strength was already engraved in everyone's minds. Even the dragons said nothing about this since they knew that Shiva's Apostles would never fight them for the number 1 title. This was enough for them. With the passage of time, Shiva's Apostles had become nicknamed the Watchers after not a single participation of them had been recorded, whether in the games or direct contribution to the Alliance's developments. Even after 2 million years had gone by since the Scalliance's foundation, they still held the 9th rank with 0 SG points in their account. When even the top 10 rulers never voiced their complaints about this matter, how could the new inner and outer circle races dare show their displeasure? This was the information that Felix learned from the data center. As for the knowledge gained from his masters, it made Shiva apostles appear 100 times scarier. You better hope the craziness of their lord has been uprooted with the birth of newer generations and the death of the old. Lady Sphinx commentated calmly. More than 1 billion years had gone by since that event. Hormungandr shared, if they hadn't calmed down, there is really something wrong with Lord Shiva's genes. Well, they have been keeping their word to the creation primogenitor by never leaving their territory, maybe it won't be so bad after all. Thor said. Whether their newer generations are calmer than their ancestors or not. Felix said with a serious tone, I am not going there without backup. 1 week later. Felix was standing with his hands held behind his back in front of the cockpit's massive window. The ruiner, Miriam, and Mammon were in front of him with stern looks on their faces. They were given merely a couple of minutes to greet Felix before he smacked them with the craziest mission they have ever heard of. My king, it's not that I am scared of them, but I really can't see a way for us to get the bloodline through force. Miriam smiled wryly, the Watchers are still part of the Alliance even when their involvement is null. Now that we have also joined the Alliance, we can't be using force on them unless we want to break the rules. Plus, they are allowed to attack anyone who trespassed in their territory without suffering any consequences, unlike us. Mammon added. I know. Felix acknowledged their statements with a head nod. He already knew that this mission wasn't going to be sunshine and rainbows when the Alliance's contract was involved. The fact that he had no leverage to make sure his request get accepted made it even worse, as it implied that using force was the only one forward. Using force against Shiva's apostles was a death-seeking wish. Still, Felix had no intentions of backing off. He knew that everyone wanted something deep down, and if he managed to work out a deal with Shiva's apostles, he wouldn't hesitate to make it happen. Let's talk with them first through the UVR and see what happens next. Felix stated. Aren't we going to alarm them like this? The ruiner frowned. Of course, we won't contact them until we are close to their territory. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly. If everything fell apart, we have to be near to make our move. Miriam and the other two looked at each other for a second before shrugging their shoulders carelessly. They could see that the odds were heavily against them, and the fact that they had no plan wasn't too optimistic. Still, they had not a single notion of leaving Felix alone, even if it meant that their mission might cause their death. They were loyal to him, but more so to their god, who was watching this whole interaction from the Void Realm. He, this might be the moment when I get freed once and for all. Nemo's smile suddenly got creepier as his eyes kept flickering from red to green. Unfortunately, Lady Sphinx wasn't nearby to see this happening with her void vision. The first reveal of this chapter happened through N0/Vel B J N. In a few minutes, Felix had grouped up with his subordinates in his UVR's room. Right now, they were sitting on the ground in a circle preparing for their mission. The journey was going to take at least 15 days by spaceship. Felix wanted to use this duration to prepare for the mission properly instead of traveling through the Void Realm. We will have only one chance to make them agree to a deal. Felix stated, so, let's brainstorm to come up with something that they can't reject. With such little information about them, it's hard to know what they want. Miriam said as she tried her best to think of something. We can see if they are desperate enough to want a wish from me. Mammon suggested using his greed laws. He knew that when it came to desperation, everyone's eyes get blinded by the level of risk. He had many cases of old authoritative individuals wishing for longer longevity after exhausting all other methods. Even when he told them that the trade might result in losing their emotions or their soul, they still agreed to the deal. I guess they will be desperate enough for their freedom. Felix murmured with a deep frown, though, it's doubtful if even your greed laws will be enough to help them out. What do you mean? Mammon and the others were confused by Felix's doubts. If it was any other jinns, they could understand his doubts, but this was Mammon. I think it's fine to tell you. Felix looked at them and asked with a serious tone, do you guys know why Shiva's apostles never leave their dimensional pocket? I thought it was a cultural thing. Miriam tilted her head in confusion. This was the public concord as everyone learned it from Shiva apostles themselves. If only it was that simple. Felix shook his head and began narrating with a solemn tone, 1 billion years ago, Lord Shiva has gone mad and made a decision to bring total destruction upon the entire universe, resetting everything back to zero. Hey! You're joking, right? Interesting. Just this first statement was enough to throw them off and cause them to question it. Who could blame them? They might not have been born for over 1 billion years, but they still existed for hundreds of millions of years. For such a major event to go past them made it really hard to believe. It's impossible to know about this event unless a primogenitor shared it, as it was marked as a taboo subject. Felix clarified. If it wasn't for his masters updating him about the history, Felix would have been just as ignorant as them. Why is it taboo? Miriam asked with a curious tone. I'm getting there. Felix continued on from where he left off. For Lord Shiva to pull off destruction on a universal level, he understood that it wouldn't be possible with his strength alone. So, he made sure to spread his seeds as far as he could, resulting in the birth of Shiva's apostles with significantly more numbers than other primogenitors' descendants. Miriam, Mammon, and even the ruiner couldn't help but suck a deep breath in shock. As much as they tried to imagine it, they just couldn't process having more Shiva's apostles than other races. The fact that they possessed destruction manipulation, one of the scariest elements in the universe, made them feel a tingle of fear in their spines at such an insane thought. Just a few numbers of Shiva's apostles right now was enough to cause every single race to bow to their fearsomeness and give them a permanent slot as top 10 rulers for the sake of having them as allies. As much as the thought itself was frightening, what Lord Shiva did with his descendants was more chilling. Felix took a deep breath and disclosed with a serious tone, instead of using his army of descendants to destroy planets and stars at a slow pace, he gathered most of them in one place and absorbed their energies, life force, spirits, and whatever they had to offer to empower himself. Then, Miriam asked with an invested expression after seeing Felix take a long pause. Luckily, he was stopped in time by an alliance of elemental lords. Felix sighed in relief. Creation primogenitor, illusion primogenitor, life primogenitor, death primogenitor, void primogenitor, even time primogenitor helped stop his madness. He was killed eventually with all of his descendants. The slowest descendants to arrive were saved from the slaughter, but at the same time ended up being punished due to their ancestors' actions. Creation primogenitor had created a special dimensional pocket that allowed everything to enter and leave, but the carriers of Lord Shiva's bloodline. Ever since then, Shiva's apostles were imprisoned in their dimensional pocket without a single method of leaving it. The rest of the primogenitors were told about the story and the elemental lords told them to never share this matter with their descendants, which eventually made this subject a taboo. This is all I know at the moment. Felix concluded his narration. His story was clearly paraphrased and shortened heavily as it was impossible to describe such a massive event in a couple of sentences. But his subordinates had gotten the big picture and it sure stupefied them to the core, just like he was when he first learned about it. You're telling me that there was a moment in time when the universe would have ceased to exist? Even though they were void creatures, this was still enough to send chills course on their spine. Luckily, the elemental lords had saved the situation. Is it really better to keep him in the dark and even feed him false information? Thor said with a deep frown. He has no use for such knowledge at the moment. Lady Sphinx answered calmly, it will just affect him negatively without any benefits. If Lord Shiva was awakened, he is going to spill the beans eventually. Hormungandr stated, if he somehow didn't get the bloodline, then he won't need to know about that event. I guess that's one way of seeing it. Thor sighed as he dropped the subject and focused back on Felix and his subordinates, who seemed to have found a solution to their dilemma. Since Shiva's apostles can't escape the dimensional pocket through the gate, how about we smuggle them through the void realm? Miriam suggested. If we made a deal to free them in this manner, I doubt they will reject it. Before Felix could respond to her suggestion, Lady Sphinx interjected, don't bother yourself with this method. Lord Cows will never let any one of them survive a single second in the void realm. Ah, I see. Felix sighed in frustration. He figured out that Lord Cows must have made a pact with the elemental lords to keep an eye on Shiva's apostles if they dared step inside his void realm. Felix told the news to his subordinates, causing them to return to the starting point. Since the dimensional pocket was locked shut, it made Felix recognize that even his spatial abilities wouldn't be able to free them. Otherwise, Shiva's apostles would have done this years ago by hiring a space worm service. What else can I offer? Felix pondered deeply, hoping to find out something that could secure the deal without touching their freedom. It wasn't easy to do, as their freedom was the only obvious non-brainer deal. I don't know if this will work, but how about promising them a meeting with Lord Shiva after you awaken him? Asna suggested while sunbathing in front of a pool and drinking a cold tropical cocktail. Felix raised his eyebrow slightly in interest at her unconventional idea. Isn't it a bit too risky? Candace expressed. How can he convince them about his ability to awaken their dead ancestor without revealing his secrets? Felix nodded in agreement at Candace's statement. The suggestion was smart, but it came with plenty of risks. He understood that Shiva's apostles would never trust him unless he showed them proof. The only proof he had was exposing his master's real statuses. If he did this, he could potentially risk this information reaching the Dark faction. Still, at this point, the Darken faction knowing about my master's death won't change anything. Felix said coldly, they have already taken what I care about. The only way they can hurt me now is by coming for me straight. Felix knew that even if they were primogenitors, it wouldn't be easy to catch him if his location wasn't compromised. In other words, it was worth taking the risk. Obviously, we will be making them sign a non-disclosure agreement first to minimize the secret getting spread. With a strict non-disclosure agreement, Shiva apostles wouldn't risk getting themselves killed by Queen Ai for the sake of sharing Felix's secrets when they had absolutely no enmity against him. In fact, if the deal went through, they would be on his side and try their best to help him awaken their ancestor for the sake of meeting him. Though, you need to make sure that you won't make a certain promise. Asna warned, you can't decide for Lord Shiva. I know. Felix nodded, the deal will be to try my best to convince him to meet them, whether they take it or not, that's up to them. Although it might not sound too reliable, there weren't really any other options at the moment. If all things failed, violence still works. Felix suddenly stood up and excused his subordinates, not planning on sharing his plan with them. After they left, he turned his UVR's room into a fighting arena and voiced a request, place 3 Shivian fighters before me at the highest difficulty possible. Since there was a chance of a fight breaking off, it would be foolish to go to battle without experiencing Shivian's strength. Obviously, those 3 Shivians were going to be created based on Lady Sphinx's memory after she gave him permission. If it wasn't for her, the virtual Shivians dummies wouldn't be able to manipulate destruction elements, since the real Shivians never approved of making this data public. 15 days later. Sir Felix, we have arrived at your destination. Queen Ai announced. Felix thanked her and logged out immediately. He teleported back to the cockpit and stared at the distance through his massive window. He had to zoom to the limit to spot a visible wavy grey crack in the middle of nowhere. There was nothing near it besides a few spaceships. This was the only spatial gate to Shiva Apostle's dimensional pocket. Are you going to contact their King Mahit now? Miriam asked the moment she appeared next to Felix with the other 2. Yes. Felix returned to his seat and logged back in. Fortunately, he was now considered one of the 10 rulers, which enable him new benefits and authoritative perks. One of them was receiving Shiva's Apostles' King's contact information to facilitate communication between the rulers. Without further ado, Felix dialed King Mahit. Ring, 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 cluck. After more than 10 seconds of ringing, the call was finally picked up. A holographic screen appeared in front of Felix, but it was darkened. Still, Felix knew that the call was connected, making him voice his greeting, King Mahit, it's a pleasure to meet you. Likewise. An elderly hoarse voice replied to Felix after a couple of seconds of silence. It sounded more like a polite reply than a sincere answer. Felix didn't care as he jumped straight to the subject. I have contacted you to seek a favor and I really hope your majesty can consider it. Felix wasn't an idiot to seek a deal from the very start, as it was harmless to see if he could solve his situation through a polite exchange of favors. Who knows? Maybe King Mahit wouldn't mind giving a few bloodline bottles to owe a favor? After all, Felix's identity wasn't the same as before. Speak. King Mahit spoke bluntly. I have reached the end of my cultivation path and decided to use Lord Shiva's bloodline in my last replacement. Felix said with a solemn tone, I found no other bloodline that can match Lord Shiva's greatness. Although it was a long shot, it wasn't bad to glorify and praise Lord Shiva's bloodline a bit to target King Mahit's pride. Unfortunately, King Mahit didn't seem too affected as he went silent for a short moment before reasoning with an indifferent tone, I believe you want me to hand you our blood for the sake of using our ancestors' bloodline. Yes. Felix added quickly, I will owe you big time, and if you need anything within reason, I will move mountains to make it happen. My apologies, but I refuse. If that's all, I will be hanging up. Before Felix could react, King Mahit hung up on him, leaving him staring at the window with a slightly dazed look. Well, that was a quick shutdown. Asna commentated. It was a far shot in the first place. Felix regained control of his emotions and said with a serious tone, now to the real thing. Without delay, he contacted King Mahit again. This time the call was picked up instantly. King Felix, if you want to keep my respect, please don't call me again about this subject. My answer will always be no. King Mahit spoke with a slightly displeased tone. /n/o/vel/b/in witnessed the first publication of this chapter on N0velbjjn. How about if I told you that I can get you a meeting with your ancestor? Felix responded calmly. King Felix, you are really pushing the line here. King Mahit said with a suppressed tone. He was clearly furious that Felix would be bold enough to use his dead ancestor's name for such nonsense. I am not joking. Felix promised with a solemn tone, I have a method to help you meet with your ancestor. However, I need you to sign an NDA first, as I can't risk this information ever seeing the light of the public. King Mahit went silent this time instead of raging or hanging up. This was enough for Felix, as it made him discern that King Mahit was actually thinking about his statements properly. Still, he was getting slightly nervous after an entire minute went by without receiving any answer. Fortunately, King Mahit didn't play with his emotions for too long, as he sent an invitation link and hung up on him again. I guess we are getting to somewhere. Felix clicked on the invitation link immediately, knowing that he had secured himself a face-to-face meeting. As he expected, the moment he opened his eyes, he found himself standing before a common wooden table in a normal modern living room. On the other side of the table, a tall, grey-skinned elderly man sat while having forearms crossed over his wide chest. In the faint light of the living room, his powerful physique was encased in a dark dignified robe. One deep-set, penetrating eye was visible on his forehead, and it was fixated on Felix, giving him the creeps. His aura was strange, and his skin was hard to the touch, like the surface of a stone. His arms were strong and sinewy, and each one could easily crush bone. He had an almost supernatural appearance due to the weird markings on his robe, which appeared to shine dimly each time sunlight touched them. This was King Mahit, the current leader of Shiva Apostles and one of the most feared and mysterious figures in the entire alliance. Please sit. Felix nodded in appreciation and sat on the opposite chair. King Mahit poured him a cup of tea and placed it on a small plate in front of Felix. Felix picked it up and took a sip before putting it back without much change of expression. "A fine tea," he said politely. He was never a fan of tea, so even if tea made out of divine leaves was put in front of him, he would still react the same. "It is one of my people's specialties as golden oolong leaves grow only in our dimensional pocket," King Mahit shared. "I see." It was clear that Felix had no interest in this tea conversation, but still, he didn't bring out the destruction bloodline subject as he didn't want to show too much desperation. He understood that he would completely lose whatever leverage he had. Fortunately, King Mahit wasn't interested in playing mental games as he was really sincere about the tea subject. The moment Felix didn't share the same love to tea as him, he switched straight to the main conversation. "What sort of NDA am I going to sign?" Felix forwarded a pre-made NDA contract and said with a serious tone, "I won't share anything unless you signed it." King Mahit ignored his statement and read the NDA contract at a slow pace. After more than 15 minutes, he glanced back up at Felix and said, "Isn't this a bit too extreme?" His reaction was understandable as the contract enforced him to never bring out any details about the upcoming conversation to anyone besides Lord Shiva, Felix, and his companions. Any transgression would lead to immediate execution. It was a known fact that when it came to executions, Queen Ai was always faster. "It's strict, but it's necessary for my protection," Felix answered. "If he really has a method to help me meet my ancestor, then it's understandable that he wouldn't want it to be exposed." King Mahit pondered deeply. King Mahit might not show it, but he desired to meet his ancestor more than anything. It was for the sole reason of asking him about his motives to destroy the universe, which caused them to get imprisoned for eternity as a punishment for his selfish actions. While almost the entire population of Shiva's apostles were taught from a young age that it was forbidden to leave their dimensional pocket, none of them knew of the real reason. Only the royal family was burdened with the truth from one generation to another. Unfortunately, the truth was too short and unconvincing for them to accept suffering from such an eternal damning fate. "Let's hope it's worth it." In the end, King Mahit signed the NDA, knowing that this was a lifetime opportunity to finally seek some answers. "Now tell me, how can you help me meet with my ancestor?" King Mahit narrowed his eyes in focus. "I am capable of awakening primogenitors' wisps of consciousness after reaching 99% of integration with their bloodline," Felix answered bluntly. This was the first time he was telling anyone about this willingly without having any sort of trust between them. It was a massive step up as Felix would have never dared to share any of his secrets before, even if an NDA was involved. This kind of confidence came only through having unquestionable strength. "Why should I believe you? You might just be saying this to get my ancestor's bloodline." King Mahit was taken aback by Felix's answer, but he still didn't outright believe him. "How about a contract?" Felix said with a serious tone, "I am willing to put my life on the line to prove it." Felix planned before on making one of his masters come forward to help him prove his statement. But then, he realized that he could use a contract to do the same thing without needing to have his masters confirm their death to a stranger for his sake. Obviously, King Mahit might be able to piece the dots and reach the conclusion that most of Felix's masters were dead, but it wouldn't be the same as a direct confirmation. If he is saying the truth, doesn't that mean his masters are actually dead and he merely has wisps of their consciousness? As expected, the first thought that went through King Mahit's mind was the life/death situation of Thor and Hormungandr. He might be isolated from the real universe, but he still received most of the important news. The death of those two primogenitors in an epic battle was a big matter that was known to all authoritative figures, though, it was put into question when both of them resurfaced. No wonder he doesn't want the news to go out. King Mahit reasoned as he stared at Felix, if the Darkins hears this news, it would change the whole dynamic of their faction's conflict. "If I got Lord Shiva's bloodline and awakened him, I promise you that I will try my very best to convince him to meet you." Felix continued on, not wanting to give King Mahit too much time to think about the method itself. A promise to convince him. King Mahit frowned, this wasn't the deal. You really think I will be able to force your ancestor to meet you? Felix shook his head, I can only try my best to persuade him. The final decision is in his hands and I can't do anything about it. King Mahit couldn't argue with him about this matter as he knew that no one would be able to force his ancestor to do anything. The fact that he tried to destroy the universe was a clear sign of his strong will to get his way. I don't believe in promises with strangers. King Mahit said calmly, make it a contract and we have a deal. As mentioned before, King Mahit wanted this meeting to happen more than anything, even if it meant trading multiple bloodlines bottles of his people for the sake of a small chance. Still, he wasn't foolish to trust in Felix's words and not bring Queen Ai into the mix. Fair enough. Felix nodded in approval. King Mahit went silent for a couple of minutes as he drafted the contract. When he was done, he forwarded it to Felix. After reading it, Felix couldn't help but knit his eyebrows in disgruntlement at the strict and vague conditions. How can Queen Ai measure how much work I put through convincing your ancestor? Felix shook his head, I can't put my life on the line for something that can't be calculated. Felix wouldn't mind signing a strict contract as long as the terms were clear. In this case, his life would be endangered for something that couldn't really be measured. Then, how about adding a term that ensures your conversation with my ancestor gets shared with me in case of failure? King Mahit said, I will be the judge then. I can agree to the term if the conversation shared was limited to only the discussion about the meeting and nothing else. Felix added, moreover, the judges will be my masters instead of you. Who says that you won't decide to terminate me even when the conversation demonstrates my hard efforts? Your masters. My masters have a reputation to uphold as primogenitors and they won't side with me if I really failed to uphold my part of the deal. Felix sighed, let's be honest, all of this is mere extra unnecessary work. You know deep down that if your ancestor wanted to meet with you, he won't need me to convince him. King Mahit went quiet at the sound of that. He knew that Felix was right, and what he was trying right now was merely hard coping. In another sense, Felix's words were really not going to have much effect on his ancestor regardless of what he said. All right, let's do it your way. King Mahit caved in at the end, knowing that this conversation was leading to nowhere. Felix would never place his life in other people's hands unless he was too desperate. At this moment, there was still the option of violence. If it didn't work, there were other bloodlines to pick from. As much as it sucks to not get the destruction bloodline, it was better than losing his life on some contract technicality. King Mahit knew that Felix had other options while he had only one. So, he added the new terms and forwarded the contract to Felix, who signed it after reading it carefully again. You may not trust in my word, but I promise you that I will try my best to convince your ancestor. Felix promised again with a serious look. We will see. King Mahit suddenly stood up and offered, I will be preparing the bloodline bottles. You are free to visit the Wisdom Palace and wait for me to finish. Before Felix could reply to his offer, King Mahit broke into light particles. For him to offer me this, he either knows that I am nearby somehow or he predicted that I won't contact him unless I got close to his home. Felix turned extra guarded at the realization that King Mahit might be having his eyes right now on his spaceship even when he had parked it tens of thousands of kilometers away from the dimensional pocket. He knew that it was possible through his third eye, as he was told that it was able to detect anyone with evil thoughts about the owner no matter how slight. It was called the Eye of Evil for a reason. I didn't have any evil thoughts about him, but the same can't be said about those four. Felix was referring to his subordinates and Nemo, who was the manifestation of evil itself. He might not have spotted him, but he could have easily picked up on Nemo's evil energy even when they were tens of thousands of kilometers away and his evil energy wasn't directed at King Mahit. This meant that if Felix and his subordinates dared to get physical with him and his people, they would have been prepared thoroughly. Felix already knew about this and still brought his subordinates, as he knew that his fate would be even worse if he decided to fight alone. Good thing the deal went through. Felix sighed in relief. It would have really gotten too ugly/n/o/vel/b/in. Witnessed the first publication of this chapter on N0vel-bjjn. While he was relieved that the peaceful option had worked, Nemo didn't seem to share the same joy. Next time his words won't make a difference and you will beg me again to lend him a hand. When that happens, I will finally get rid of you. Nemo's eyes flickered again to a red color as the voice kept speaking in his mind with the creepiest tone ever. Before the voices could get stronger, Nemo retook control of his mind, turning his eyes back to green again. Eeeeeeee. Nemo knew that the red-eyed entity was right, as he only needed to absorb a few more laws and he would finally gain the upper hand on him. When that happened, he had no idea what he would do to Felix. The only thing he was certain about was that he would never kill him. Unfortunately, there were plenty of fates much worse than death when it came to dealing with the paragon of sins himself.